can come back to. Was anyone able to read ahead to this week's? You have the whole text, so assuming you have time. There's something that I recommend, and I'll actually show you how to do it. And I think I mentioned it in academic writing for those who have me for academic writing. And let me just demonstrate it. So this is Person, Divinity, and Nature. And let me come down to a place with this text. So in Acrobat, you will have your PDF reader. Acrobat is one, and the main one. You come to View. You come down to Read Out Loud, and you activate Read Out Loud. Right? From there, so after you activate it, now you say read to end of document.
Part 1 Conceptions of the Person Introduction various stages of evolution into a complete person.
You can slow it down.
By ceremonies in which ancestral assistance is called upon to ensure the continuity of the community. These stages.
So this way you can be cooking, I don't know if you cook, I cook. You can be doing whatever you need to do, ironing your clothes, and you're reading the book at the same time. If you know maybe there's something you want to actually read, you can just come back here, read out loud, and pause it. It also has the Shift Control C to pause. So you can pause and say, oh, you know, that was something I want to actually see. It's mentioning an image or a figure. You can take the time. But this is something that allows me, like, over a day or two, I can read a 600-page book, right? Otherwise, it would be very difficult. I'm juggling 1,000 things, homeschooling my children and whatever else that I'm doing. So I wouldn't have time to read, but using this. And, you know, I can also, I use Evernote, which is this program here. And this is actually an Evernote that I'm doing for the film talk. This evening, you should come to the film, Fruitvale Station, about Oscar Grant in the context of Black Lives Matter. But anything that, you know, sticks out, you can just come here, paste it in, and you just have that thought and you can build upon it later. I use this for my notebooks. So I have this one for all of the articles that I've either worked on already or that I plan on working on. I'll be driving and just an idea will come to me, or especially when I'm listening to one of these books. So it will just bring up an idea and I say, oh, let me write that down. That's an article idea. So I'll put it in. I have like about 100 or so in there. And then this one was what I was doing for the multiple selves. This first thing of things that I really wanted to discuss. So I'll put all of these here in there, especially where it's talking about left hemisphere of the brain, right hemisphere of the brain. So these are just tools. It's not the class itself, but these are tools that you can use. There's also a similar one for the phone. I know one for Android. I'm sure there's one for iOS if you have that. And it's called @Voice. That's this one. @Voice. And it does the exact same thing. So you have a PDF on your phone. You open it with @Voice and it will read it to you. So you just put your headphones on. People think you're listening to music, but you're reading books. Right? So this is just side advice. But let's get to. Does anyone use any of that already? You find it helpful?
Read out what you use.
So there are lots of different programs. Those are the ones that I use, Acrobat and @Voice. But even if you're on Mac, if you're on iOS, you can just do search for text to speech is what the technology is called, and you'll find so many different solutions out there that will allow you to really get this in.
Sometimes the reading is non-stop. It doesn't obey full stops. It's just mentioning the words.
You can actually tweak those in the settings. So in Acrobat, you can go in to edit, preferences. It's a long list. I have to find it in here when it comes up. Alright, so you come to preferences, and way down in this long list is reading, and luckily mine was already up. So you can have this where you can change the pitch, you can change the words per minute. I have mine going very fast just because I don't have time. I say get through my book quickly. But you can change some of these things. You can either use the default speech attributes or change it. And also, depending on what text to speech engine you use, you can even have settings there where you can say how long to pause. Especially kind of voice, it allows that type of tweaking. Right? Change the volume, all these things. So again, these are, I'm letting you in on tools that I actually use in order to be able to get my work done. So today we're dealing with the person as multiple selves. And one of the texts, I updated our syllabus, it's still there in the Dropbox. Everyone was able to see it, correct? Okay. So I updated the syllabus with specific page numbers. One of the texts that we'll work on as well that I have there is African Spirituality on Becoming Ancestors. And you'll see that for different topics, I'll focus in on specific ethnic groups because sometimes I find that specific ethnic groups have more articulated expressions of them. So this idea about rites of passage, I found that the Bakongo way of articulating it, you can find it throughout the continent, but I found that the Bakongo one from Congo is probably the most elucidated form of it, where they actually depict it as a diagram. You can see the sun rising and all these things. Everyone pours libation because they understand this, but this is a very good way of representing, you know, the reason why, the analogy between the sun and the human being. And also, it's an analogy that extends beyond the human being to understanding how the universe was created. So we'll actually go into creation stories that basically parallel that exact same type of idea. When we get to number and divination, we'll focus on the Yoruba because Ifa system is a very articulated system, and I find it to be very helpful. You'll find divination all throughout the continent, but we'll focus in, and we'll still give examples from throughout the continent for each one, but we'll kind of focus in. For this one, the person has multiple selves. I find that the Akan have a very articulated expression of this. In terms of the aspects of the self-play, you'll find some in other groups that are very close. The Gan will have similar, Ewe will have similar. So today we're going to work on the person as multiple selves. That's just supposed to be as multiple selves. The destiny self, transcendent self, thinking and feeling self, ancestral and reincarnated self, and the dream self. Right? So, in Kamalu, page 52, he talks about not all aspects of the self and the various cultures can fit neatly into these categories, but they indicate how the person is viewed as a multiple of selves. These selves, contrary to some beliefs, appear to exist interdependently with other selves, and their roles sometimes appear to merge. So, again, this is something that came up last class. We were talking about describing rather than translating, right? So if you say, okay, Gra is soul, right? That can be very problematic, as opposed to saying, this is Gra, now let me explain what it does and what it is. So I actually want us to, and another example. So there's something that I say that the equal sign will kill our people. Because what we do this morning, we have at my house a house help. So I was asking her, what does she understand Awurade Nyankopɔn to be? And she started talking about this white Jesus image and these things. So I asked her, well, the word Awurade Nyankopɔn was there before Christianity was brought here. So what was the indigenous understanding of Awurade Nyankopɔn? And she found it very difficult to even get to what the original concept was, or the word Osofo. So if I say Osofo, most people start thinking about the church, right? If I say, oh, I'm Osofo, they'll say, what church? Right? As opposed to the word Osofo was there already. So what was the original meaning of it? The fact that we've used this direct translation for Osofo means pastor, it means that the original understanding that was connected to Osofo has been completely erased, wiped away, to the point where people can't even think that there's something outside of church means Osofo. Right? So these are some of the problematic issues of using this direct equal sign and say this means that, period. Alright? And even, I think I showed this previously, at least in one of my talks, and I keep this with me. And you can go downstairs in front of our museum. Myself and my daughter have a gold wage chart on loan, right? And if you look at the gold wage chart, you will see this. And this is one of the most significant gold weights there. Can someone tell me anything about this? Can you see it well? Should I pass it? Now, why is this so significant? I'll let everyone see it and then we'll continue.
What did you call it, sir?
I haven't called it yet, but I will call it very shortly. I want to know if anyone is familiar with it.
Okay. So before that, and what does Osofo mean?
Right. So Osofo was the traditional, you have the Akomfo who are predominantly female, and then the Asofo who are predominantly male. So if you go to a place like Akonidi at Latte, you will see a clearing, and the Asofo are the caretakers of the Obosom Akonidi.
Oh,
And this is just one example, it's for various places. So it's a gender, for the most part, balanced type of deal. So the men are the Asofo, and they deal with the Obosom. You can go directly to them and have whatever dealt with. They deal with sacrifices, they deal with indigenous medicine, you know, if you have something like that. Then on the other side, you have predominantly female, and that's the Akamfo. And they have their work with, you know, they themselves will get possessed. Typically, the Asofo don't do that. They will get possessed, they, you know, do the whole Akom ritual. There's some overlap where both of them can deal with indigenous medicines, but usually that is the distinction, where you have the Asofo who do this, and then the Akomfo who do that. And there's another one called Obosomfo, and there's actually an article on Bibitumi Kasa. We're doing an upgrade, so don't go right this second. By Kwesi Bimpong, where he goes into the difference between Okomfo, Osofo, and Obosomfo. Typically, the Obosomfo is tied to a specific family, a specific lineage, and they'll carry the brass pan, and they also get possessed, but only when they're carrying the brass pan, and it's something that's hereditary, only in the family. And he also, I think it's that exact same article, he talks about the movement when there was a cocoa boom. People moved away from their traditional settlements in order to take advantage of this, you know, cocoa farming in other places, you know, going to places like Kofuji or wherever. So you had, because of this social movement, a break in the link to where they were living before. So because of that, he links that to the rise of the Okomfo, who isn't necessarily from your family, but you can still get spiritual services done there. And an emphasis on so-called witch catching, you know, this idea of Bayifo is everywhere, and we're the ones who can do it, usually with the Obosom coming from the north like Tikare, and so forth and so on. But again, there's a distinction between these, but most people just don't even know the difference. If they see your hair, they will say Rasta.
Yeah.
And the last thing on their mind is that you must be initiated into African spiritual system. You understand? And even if you tell them that, their brains will not compute, like, no, it's not possible.
Yeah.
All right, is anyone familiar with this? Everyone has seen it. Anyone familiar with this?
I think that the word comfort also has to do with somebody who's a bridge builder between that which is natural and that which is spiritual. And that is why it have we also are
And actually, in especially amongst the Guan and Equakim, this was the traditional ruler. So similar to the Ga, similar to others, they had the political ruler and the spiritual ruler was the exact same. As opposed to, like, you would have a distinction between this is the Ohene, this is the Nsumankwahene, and these types of things, separation between church and state, to use that terminology. But also, this was someone who's not only dealing with spiritual, they're dealing with political choices, military choices, and everything. They are, and you'll find it throughout the continent as well, that type of setup. All right. So here, yes.
Gold weights are like they standardized as in money, so they were used to measure the gold on scales.
Yeah.
But the most interesting thing about them was the visual verbal mixes, whereby you see them, they evoke some sort of thoughts or code that I believe just as the ancient writers of Egypt would do. So, yeah, I'll shortly the gold weights.
Very good. And this particular one?
This sign, I don't know it.
This one is called Auradin Yonkopon. Auradin Yonkopon.
The sign.
This is what this is.
The sign.
Yeah. Not just the sign, but the shape of it as well is part of it. It could have been a square, it could have been a circle, but it's important that it's a triangle. Alright? So, what you will find is that the triangle represents the womb, and that's the feminine aspect of the Creator, and that's known as Auradi. And this spiral represents the sperm of the Creator. We're talking about creation. So this is this creating, generating life force that comes out and then goes in. So basically, and that's the Onyankopon part. So basically what you're talking about is the unity between masculine and feminine aspects that are necessary to create anything. Right? But again, with the equal sign, if I just go outside and ask any random person what is Auradin Yonkopon, they'll point to a white person on the wall and say, it's Caesar Borgia. So that's what the equal sign has done, is completely erase this to the point where if I show this, people won't even have a concept of it. But the reason why I said this is one of the most important is because it shows that you have an African worldview as opposed to the Creator being a white man sitting up in the sky who's very jealous and very poor and needs your money every Sunday. That this is an idea that creation requires both masculine and feminine aspects, and you'll find it in all types of stories where, like, an evil ruler will tell a boy, go, here's a bull, go create an entire herd. And everyone knows that you require masculine and feminine in order to create anything. And we'll find this as we continue. We're going to go into creation stories, right? And one thing that you'll find about the creation stories is, and we mentioned this last time, that it talks about the primordial waters, right? And the waters are again representing the womb. And then it talks about either a mound or a hill or an anthill, a termite mound. The sun itself comes into those waters. And basically what you have is an extended analogy of how we know creation takes place, how all of us were born. That's how creation took place. It took the feminine and the masculine in order to create. That we're taking that analogy and said that must have been how it was in the beginning. And again, it's the idea that creation wasn't something that was there and now it stopped and now everything else is, whatever it said. The idea that creation is still ongoing. It's not a remote time in the past, but when you and your wife give birth to a child, and even before that, when the sperm and the egg meet and then they start dividing, just as you heard in the creation stories, the 8 become 16 and so forth, that all of those things are creation. You understand? So again, it's a very African worldview of understanding the Creator and then also what creation is. Okay? Go will come back. So again, that was just on this idea about the equal sign and why we will try to shy away from that as much as possible. And again, going into describing rather than translating, I've set something up for you, and I want you to take your notes. I may have to come out of this view because it's not showing correctly. Okay. Okay, not okay. Okay. All right, so you can see it this way. So basically what this is a schema, a way of categorizing and describing what we're talking about. So as opposed to using the simple, and oftentimes in its simplicity it goes off equal sign, I want us to look at the source of whatever the aspect is that we're talking about. Did it originate with the Supreme Being? Did it originate with the divinities? Did it originate with the ancestors? Did it originate with the community? Did it originate with the mother? Did it originate with the father? So for example, if we're talking about Moja, you say, oh, well, that comes from the mother's side. We're talking about Okra, okay, that comes from the Supreme Being, along with the Nkrabia that's associated with it, the destiny that's associated with it. Or we're talking about Ntro, okay, well, that comes from the father's side. So basically, we'll be able to categorize, and some you'll find overlaps, so you'll put it into two boxes. You understand? Oh, amongst these people, they say that it's transmitted from the Supreme Being through the Father to the person, so you'll put it in both boxes. So that's on the left-hand side, the source or the aspect, right? The source of the aspect, rather. So I want you to take your notes where it's set up in that way. On the top side is the description. So when we're talking about the destiny self, the transcendent self, the thinking and feeling self, the ancestral and reincarnated self, and then also the dream self. What do they do? What are they responsible for? So you say, oh, well, this is the aspect that is responsible for you attaining your mission and your purpose. You understand? It comes from the Supreme Being, so that's one angle. And then what the destiny self does amongst these people is that it points you on your life path. You can say, okay, transcendent self, what does this one do? Or well, this is responsible for your thinking, for your dream states, or whatever the case may be, right? Amongst these people. Amongst another people, they have a separate aspect, which is the dream self, and that's all that it does, right? So basically, it's a way for you to be able to understand what each one of these is. And hopefully that will help you to organize your notes and to think about what we're dealing with.
More than the question, reading a text, was in Calamus. You mentioned that whereas in most of African areas, as in earth as a female and the sky god as a male, in the Egypt is the reverse.
Exactly.
Right.
Right. Yes, there is. I have mine. Oh, class rep. The dog ate my maca. Oh, good. We have Noah. We have. So, the core aspect is that the idea is complementarity, complementary opposites, male and female, and that's the understanding throughout the continent that it requires both. So, in a place, one of the main reasons is that coming from the earth, you have the Tekken, which is known as an obelisk, if you see the Washington monuments and all these things. So here you have a symbolic representation of a penis, So if the sky is male, then you have homosexuality, which doesn't create. So because you're in a culture, a civilization where you have all of these penises all throughout the land, if the sky is male, then it goes against the African worldview, one, but then also this idea that it requires both male and female to create. So the land has to be male, and then the sky has to be female. And if you go into the original story of Asar, Aset, and Heru, right? That's, is anyone familiar with that? Somewhat? Okay, well, let me just briefly cover it. So, we went through last time that Nebet Het, also called Nephthys, and Set were paired, and then also Asar and Aset were paired as one of those first original 8. So they were brother, sister, husband, wife. Now, Set was the brother of Asar, but he was jealous of Asar and wanted his wife Aset. So what he did is he tricked and also wanted to rule all of Kemet for himself. So what he did, he tricked Asar, and I'll write this for you. That's Asar. So what he did is he tricked Asar, and let me write Aset for you as well then. And what this is, you see on both, is the throne. It's a seat, metaphorically. You can write this with or without a divinity determinative after. And this is Aset. So he tricked Asar to come to a gathering, at which point he attacked Asar, killed him, and cut him up into 14 pieces, and scattered them throughout the nomes of Kemet. But the last piece, the phallus, was thrown into Hapi, which was the indigenous name of the Nile River. So she was able to gather in her love all of these pieces and bring them together, but the phallus she was not able to get. And it was also said to have been eaten by a fish inside of the Nile, so that made it much more difficult. So what she did is that she created a Tekken, this one, and then she transformed herself into a bird called a kite. Not the one you fly on a string, but she transformed herself into a kite like a hawk. And then she alighted on the top of the Tekken. And from this was the original idea of an immaculate conception. So she became impregnated with the seed of Asar and eventually gave birth to Heru, what the Greeks called Horus. So all this, you may know them by the Greek names Osiris as Asar, Isis as Aset, and Horus as their child. Then that's where you get the word hour and all these things that have to do with time coming from the Horus one. So eventually Horus was able to come of age and bring justice to Set for what Set had done. But at that point in time, especially in the early time, there were these Tekkens all around that were built. So pyramids, Tekkens, and all of those were seen as analogous metaphors for the male member. So if you have this be the male member and then this be male, you'll have a problem. But in other places where this wasn't a factor, then it's fine that this one is male and then this one is female. And it seems to make sense in other places where this isn't, what I call this, the variable, right? Because the earth it seems female amongst other places because it gives birth to, vegetation, so forth and so on. But that's the major reason why it's different in Kemet. But I think the core of it is the worldview of complements. It requires male and female to be a creator, right? It requires the balance of Ma'at in order to be a creator. So even though you see this one looks different than it does in other places, it's still coming from that same worldview that it requires male and female to create, right? I hope everyone has got this. I'll go back to slideshow mode. Does it make sense? Right. And actually, I believe that the story is in Person, Divinity, and Nature. It's also in African Philosophy, the Pharaonic Period by Obengo, which is now in there as well. So again, the idea of the person as multiple selves. So from the viewpoint of ancient Kemet philosophy, or Egyptian philosophy, as he says, human beings, and again, Kemet, what is Kemet? I want to make sure everyone has that point. Ancient Egypt, what is the meaning of Kemet? Land of black people. Very good. So from the viewpoint of ancient Kemet philosophy, human beings are a combination of material and spiritual forces intimately intertwined. So the body is Ket with its organs and instincts, and there's the Ka, a vital force which gives the body life, conceived as a sort of specific astral double of the individual being. The Ka expressed the intimate essence of the ego. There was the Ba, a principle of divine origin, represented in figurative art as a bird with a man's head, clutching in its claws the Ankh, a symbol of life. And we wrote how to write Ka last time. Did we do Ba? No? Was anyone ever able to download the dictionary? The dictionary of Middle Egyptian? Because you just do a search for Ba, it'll show you exactly what I'm about to write here. That's Ba. So a bird body, let me make the head a little bit bigger, because he's very intelligent. And this is said to be something like a container pot that has smoke coming out of it. So it's like the idea of something ethereal that can't be grasped. And then Ankh, everyone's familiar with the Ankh as well. So Ankh can be represented just like this. Then I give a determinative after. So Ankh translates to life, right? And in some of the Middle Lecture texts, they say it's a sandal strap. Others say that this is the feminine aspect, the womb. This is the masculine aspect, the phallus, and then these are the offspring that come out from it. Again, this idea of complementarity in order to be life, in order to be a creator. All right, so we continue. So first we start off with destiny, a spiritual double. Again, we don't want to give that as this means that, but we'll try to explain what it is that we mean by these words. So variously known as the Ka of ancient Kemet, Chi, Igbo of Nigeria, Ori, Yoruba of Nigeria, Okra, Asante of Ghana, Kla, Ga of Ghana, Ehi, Bini of Nigeria, Se, form of Benin, Ido, Cuba, of Congo, DRC, so forth and so on. So there's an idea of, again, complements. One aspect is in the physical body, and another aspect is in the heavens or the invisible, spiritual, or ancestral realm. Right? In this, we have the idea of the self, the destiny, and life purpose. And this is, again, the reason why, again, from an African worldview, from various places, the reason why you're here is to fulfill your destiny. Right? So all of the other things are there to assist you in fulfilling your destiny. Right? There's a Yoruba text, Ogunda Meji, is one of the many Odu, and inside of that you have what's called Eseifa. And the Eseifa are multiple lines of poems that when you throw down, I forgot my Opaleifa again. I'll bring it. But when you cast this chain, you have all these different combinations that could come up, 256 in total, which is 4 times 4 times 4 times 4. So with this, when it goes down and you say, okay, this is Ogunda Meji, the Babalao doesn't know what your problem is. And there's even a proverb, Aki bonju eniti andifafun, and it translates to, we are not wiser than the person who we're divining for. So you just throw it down and then you say what it is, and the person themselves, through self-knowledge, is supposed to understand how it relates to their life. So if deep down inside they know that they did something wrong to their wife, and then this one comes up and it talks about treating your wife well, they know, okay, they get the message. Do this sacrifice, do that, things will be well, and then you act on it. So in Ogunda Meji, it's very profound from a philosophical point of view, because it talks about Tarulebani Rokun, who can join a person to go to the ocean. Tarulebani Rokun, who can join a person to go all the way to the ocean. Basically, the idea of the ocean, like the end of one's life, that you're going all through life and then your goal is to get to the ocean. And it's very similar to the Bakongo understanding of Kalunga. I think we mentioned this last time. Kalunga. And that is the word for the ocean. It's also the word for the supreme being, the all in all in Kikongo language, right? So, as who will be able to join a person to go all the way to the ocean, and it starts asking about, well, what about this Orisha? And the Orisha are the divinities in the Yoruba tradition. So it says, all right, well, what about Shango? And Shango says, Benny, yes, I will be able to join a person and stay all the way to the ocean. And then it has this refrain, Ile babare enko, but what about the house of your father? What if they prepare the begiri dish, which is his favorite food, and do this and do that and make this sacrifice of this, fowl for you? Then would you still go? He said, no, I would just eat and go back to my own house because I've been satisfied. And then it goes through for Yemoja, and it's very good as a teaching tool because it tells you where all of the Orisha are from, where all of their favorite foods are, all of their names, of course. But for each one, they say, all right, once I get my favorite dish, I'm going back to my own place, right? So eventually it gets to Ori, which is the head. And it says, well, first it says, all right, we give up. We don't know. So who can do it? Orumila, even Orumila can't do it. Even if I can't do it, so who can do it? So it says, okay, the Ori can do it. Because who, when the person dies, do they chop off their head before they bury them? That the Ori will stay with a person throughout one's life. So this is associated with your destiny. Ori comes from the root verb ri. I think we mentioned this last time, right? Ori is the head, but the root verb that it comes from is ri, which is to see or to experience. So in Yoruba, the word for experience is Iriri aye. Let's say that. Iriri aye. Which is like the seeing of the world, the experiencing of the world. And that's how you would say experience in Yoruba. But all of that is coming from the same root, which is ri, to see. So this is the one that can see physically what's going on, but also can see on a deeper level, right? So basically at the end of Ogunda Meji, say only the Ori, Kososha Tolegbeni Lehi Orieni, that there is no Orisha that can support a person without the prior consent of the person's own Ori, right? So, and I found that this is less understood in the diaspora. There are practitioners of Yoruba spirituality in Cuba, Puerto Rico, Brazil, the US, of course. But there it's more of an idea of which Orisha owns your head. And it's like kind of like set up into football teams. All right, we're the Oya people, we're the Shango people, blah, blah. And this one owns our head. as opposed to this type of understanding that those are just there to assist you in reaching your destiny, to join you to go all the way to the ocean, right? So in this type of understanding, the Orisha aren't there for you to just worship every day and give them this and give them that, give them this, give them that. They were put there by the Creator in order to assist you to achieve your destiny. That's your whole reason for being here. So the degree to which this Orisha can assist you to achieve your fullest potential, then you go to that Orisha. If this one isn't going to assist you in reaching your fullest potential of your Ori, then this one may assist you in doing it, right?
Orisha and divinity.
Yes, Orisha. All low tone, Orisha. Orisha. Let's say that. Orisha. Orisha. Good. Yeah. Can you see the Orisha? Yeah, some people who have the eyes to see can see. Yeah. And we'll actually go into that at the end of this chapter. It talks briefly about this idea of energy fields and those who are able to detect them. Yeah. All right, so the self, destiny, and life purpose. The self is central in that it is often associated with the other selves that make up the person, and also in that it appears to orientate the whole person towards the fulfillment of his, and we say, or her destiny and life purpose. It takes part in choosing the individual's destiny and the invisible realm before the individual is born. And we find this particularly amongst the Akan. They have the Okra and the Nkrabia, where Bia can be understood as manner or understood as place. So you say Adidibia, or you say Yo Bia, you're saying the manner of doing something. And the root of both of those are Kra, which is to say farewell. So this is the last thing that you did with the Creator before you came to be born into this world. Good. Then we also talk about the spirit double. So Bini from Nigeria is the person who chooses his or her own destiny before birth, and the Supreme Being gives him or her the means to achieve this through a split personality or double. So this is exactly what we're talking about. The whole purpose of your life isn't to just say, let me go to the shrine and just keep chopping up chickens for it. It's that my purpose in the world is in order to fulfill my destiny. So I will go, it's like, let's say, for example, draw an analogy of like the hospital. It's there to assist you when you're sick, but you're not supposed to pitch a tent and set up inside of the hospital and say, all right, this is just where I'm going to be all my days. Well, unless you're a doctor and then you're there all day. But again, it's there in order to assist you when you need the assistance, but that's not supposed to be the end point of your life, right? So the spiritual double or destiny directs the realization of the complete person. And again, as we're talking about these other spiritual entities, as we're dealing with person, divinity, and nature, this section is talking about person, then we'll go into divinity. That when you look at, for example, here you have the Abosom, you have the Motia, you will have other spiritual forces. So why are the spiritual forces there? Ultimately to assist you in achieving your destiny, right? So again, it's the idea that the Creator has given you various resources in order to allow you to do it. So this river may be sacred because the river is assisting you in achieving your destiny. If the river isn't there, you die. You have nowhere to drink, you have nowhere to fish, you have nowhere. So the river literally is put there in this understanding in order to assist you in achieving your destiny. Everyone knows if you don't drink water, you will have a problem. Of course, we are no longer drinking water, and that link has been severed. So now we pollute asbestos, arsenic for gold mining, all of that is in the river. So, and again, I want to emphasize this idea of wisdom as having learned from experience, right? There's a theory that talks about just the Ice Age as being a factor in the Sahara becoming a desert, but also the effect of human intervention through cattle herding at one point in time. Everyone is aware that at one point the Sahara wasn't a desert. No? Yes, good. All right, but so there are these natural changes that occur over time, but in addition to that, it can be exacerbated by human activity. such as chopping down trees in order to make this charcoal, in order to smelt iron, all these things, the Iron Age, a lot of that required a lot of charcoal, things that were chopping down the trees. Also, when you deal with pastoral, that one of the sources of Kemet, when you talk about Nabta Playa, and I hope, was everyone able to read that text about Nabta Playa?
Yeah.
You did? Good. So it was talking about the pastoral people who were herding. They would go to that site and they would leave, and that led to the development of the first calendar, because you need to know at what point in time the rains will come, at what point in time the rains aren't there. So it's a very practical thing, right? So in addition to that, you had this pastoral thing where people are bringing their cattle. And also, if you look at the Narmer palette, is everyone familiar with the Narmer palette? Do we know Narmer? Who is Narmer?
He was the one who brought this out and
Exactly. Very important figure. One of the most important human beings on the face of the planet in the history of all humanity. So you need to know the name. Mainly because this was the first state. As we talk about nation states and, you know, Ghana, Mali, Songhai, or anything else, France, UK, if we're talking about states, the original state is the one that was created by Narmer, also known as the catfish, and that's what the second symbol is a catfish that he was represented by. So this first one is a chisel, and then the second one is a catfish. Is anyone aware of the significance of the catfish among African people? Especially in Benin, amongst the Fon, they still have that exact same conception of the catfish.
No Nigerians like it too.
Yeah. What else?
I know their hands call it
Ajini, that's true.
in Benin you find crowds of
Exactly. But why? What's the significance? You are going to wait patiently for me to tell you. Or look at my forehead and wait for it to pop up there. So the catfish is able to survive in water, of course. That's the fish. But also in swampy areas, it's able to come up and be on land as well. So it's partially amphibious. Some of them also are able to have electric, shock. So you touch it, you'll feel that shock. But basically, it is a metaphor for having power, being omnipotent. I have power in the water, I have water and power in the sky, right? So amongst the Yoruba, they have the idea of Olorun, which is the owner of the sky, literally, and Olokun, which is the owner of the ocean, literally. And again, from all these creation stories, it's talked about how originally everything was just water, just Okun, nothing but ocean. And from that, in the creation, the sky and the ocean were separated. So with this, the land started to take over parts that used to be the realm of exclusively the ocean. So in one of the stories, they talk about how the ocean wanted to get that land back and decided to challenge Olorun. Let me write these for you so you can follow along. So Olorun is the owner of the sky, Olokun is the owner of the ocean. Whenever you see this Olo or Olo, it's the owner of something, Olodumare and so forth. So Olokun wanted to challenge Olorun to a contest. Now everyone knew that Olokun was the most talented weaver of cloth. Had cloth like this, had cloth like this, cloth like that. Any type of color of cloth, Olokun was able to weave it, right? Maybe a reference to seaweed and other things that grow there. So in sending a message that I want to challenge you, Olorun, to get my realm back, this that you have taken from me. So Olorun said, how will I ever be able to compete? Because Olokun, she is truly and also feminine, she's truly the greatest at weaving. So what Olorun decided to do is send another Orisha called Agama. Let's say it together. Agama. Agama. Agama, literally being the chameleon, right? And that's the messenger of Olorun in the Yoruba understanding. So Agama went down into the ocean in order to hear what Olokun had to say. Yes, I'm going to challenge. So Agama said, oh, that's no problem. I'm sure Olorun would be happy to accept your challenge. But first, if you could just show me some of your cloths so that we can see what we have to compete with. So Olokun, being very proud and knowing that she had the best cloth, she brought out a bright red cloth, tokupa, and showed it. Aha! So as soon as Agama saw it, Agama did what? Turned the exact same shade of red. Olokun said, ah! Kuburu. So Olokun went out and brought back another cloth. This one was purple. Elisi Aluko. Put it down. As soon as Agama saw it, oh, Lewa, it's beautiful. And then what happened? Changed to the exact same shade. This went on. The next time, oh, I have one for you. Alawa Weko, the green one. Aha! As soon as Agama said, oh my Lewa, it's truly beautiful. The exact same shade. Eventually, Olokun said, if even the messenger can do all of this, I don't want to challenge Olorun. So this is the way Olorun was able to bluff Olokun. If the competition actually happened, Olorun would have lost, and all of this would now be ocean. But again, it's this idea of the feminine aspects being the oceans, and then the masculine aspect being the sky. And regardless of whether the land is male and the sky is female, or vice versa, it's the idea of complements are necessary to be a whole. That's what we're talking about. We're saying complements from complete. Not like compliment, like I like that shirt. That's very nice, right? Completion.
It's about the spiritual double. You were mentioning how, like, the rivers, for instance, aid you in.
Exactly.
So that means a lot of things can be your double.
So this is different. So that was kind of a sidebar. We're talking about the spiritual double and your destiny. We're talking about all of these things that are provided for you to be able to achieve your destiny. So it may be in the form of a river. So if you go amongst Akan, Asiutano, if you go amongst the Yoruba or Shun, that all of these are seen as being put there in order to assist you in fulfilling your destiny. And then each one would have its own characteristics, its own traits, and all of these things. And that was in the context also of this idea of wisdom, right? Wisdom is having learned from experience. So if you look at contemporary Africa, immediately before Europeans came to decimate Africa, you would have these sacred groves where you're not allowed to cut trees, you're not allowed to pollute the water. On these days, you let the earth rest. All of these ideas that we could look at this as, oh, they're just doing something. Or we could look at this as they may have learned from experience of what happens when you don't do that. If we don't set aside our part for, the trees not to be cut, what is the effect of that? Once we know that the effect is something that's not helpful, then we say, that's why we're going to institute this. If we know the effects of polluting the water, perhaps we've done it before, perhaps not, but if we've done it before, now we say, we don't want to do that anymore. That's the wisdom part that I've learned from experience, that polluting the water destroys future generations. When me, myself, I reincarnate, I won't be able to fulfill my destiny because these things that were put here to help me fulfill my destiny are no longer going to be there. They will be destroyed. And also, even this idea of reincarnation is not the only way to look at things. You could look at things like a straight line. Like, I just am comfortable throughout my life. I eat everything, and then when I die, that's it. I go sit beside a white man in the sky. But there's also an idea that perhaps human beings are a bit selfish. So if I know that I'm the one who's going to reincarnate, it makes it perhaps a bit more personal of me taking care of things and making sure I don't just destroy everything, eat up everything. So again, we're talking about wisdom. If we already have learned that lesson, of thinking about it like a straight line, it makes you just destroy everything. You just want to take everything, and then when you die, you don't care. As opposed to thinking about it of, I'm like the sun, I will come back, and me, myself, I will use this again, right? You'll have a vastly different behavior. Again, neither one is to say that this is a doctrine that's written down, and that's it. You just obey it. But again, wisdom is learning from experience. And again, I'm speaking about this in reference to like what we can see right now, of when people are no longer thinking about it this way. Look at what's going on with the environment, right? So whatever lesson was learned 10,000 years ago before the Sahara became a desert, we don't know that anymore. So if you don't know the lessons that you already learned, you'll do the exact same thing. You have to learn the lesson again. So after we've destroyed all of the rivers, we've destroyed all of the land, then we'll say, you know what? We need to do something different. Now we have to learn that exact same lesson ourselves. There's a proverb in Yoruba that basically goes, ọlọ́gbọ́n ló lọ ọgbọ́n ẹlòmíràn ṣọgbọ́n òmùgọ̀ ló fi ọgbọ́n ara rẹ̀ ṣọgbọ́n. Basically the idea that a wise person uses the wisdom of someone else's, the experiences of someone else to learn wisdom. A fool has to use his own experience to learn wisdom, right? So for example, if 10,000 years ago we had a role in the Sahara Desert, coming down and destroying, encroaching through our tree cutting, through our cattle, we learned that lesson there. So us in this generation, we could say, you know what? Not taking care of the environment is bad. We can use their wisdom to know that. They didn't know that before this happened. But if we don't have that wisdom, then we say, let's try to find it out ourselves. That was a scientific experiment that was done before. We don't learn the scientific experiment. Let's do it ourselves. And then 2,000 years from now, we're saying, all right, now we know. All right, but let's continue. So Bini from Nigeria, for example, it is the person who chooses. We mentioned that. Also, the spiritual double or destiny directs the realization of the complete person. It is that aspect of the self which guides us towards becoming our higher selves. In this sense, in the sense of being a guide, it is also conceived in part as a guardian ancestor, as in the case of the Yoruba double, the Ori, or the Bini Ehi mentioned above. All right. So again, there's this idea of something that can be passed down. We'll go more in depth into that as well. This is the Ka. I hope everyone has this in your notes. And we use this iconography to better understand this idea of the shoulders being the seat of the soul. That even at that time, you'll have this idea of the shoulders being the seat of the Ka. And this is going to be also very important when we come to the Ba, and then come to understand the Ka and the Ba and how they fuse together. And that will shed some insight on another thing we'll discuss. So the Ka, we could translate it as either soul, spirit, essence, personality, fortune, will, kingship, goodwill, or phantom. But all of those ideas, you can find contexts in which Ka can be used like that. So the spiritual double or destiny, now we're coming back, and again, look at the chart that you wrote before, right? So now we're looking at a description. What does it do? We don't want to focus on the translation. What does the thing do? So the spiritual double or destiny is often thought of as being a representation of divine intelligence or mind within the individual. So again, this is coming from a divine source, right? The Ka, for instance, was like an intelligence with an existence that Budge claims to be independent of the body, or which would separate or unite itself to the body at will. It might be claimed in line with the understanding of the spiritual double in traditional Africa that the Ka is a spark of divine intelligence. So divine source, but then also, what does it do? It's able to separate and reunite with the body. What else does it do? Now, we can find a similar idea, and this Adinkra in the top right, do we know it? It's Krapa. the good soul, and that's the proverb that's associated with it. Krapate se okra, uchrifin. So you see a cat is always licking itself, it's always trying to be clean, and it seems that the kra is like that as well. So if you keep engaging in behaviors that the kra abhors, eventually it can leave you, and that leaving you is said to leave a void, where any other malignant spirit can come and fill that void. And that's where you see people who are, you would say, oh, they're deranged, they're out of their minds, they're whatever, that this is seen as being the thing that precipitates that literally they're not being themselves. Oh, you're not yourself recently, right? That's why the kra has gone. But in this understanding, there are also rituals that can be brought. So anyway, individuals showing neurotic tendencies may be said to be grieving. That's my attempt at fancy. That is, the soul is sad. To rejuvenate a sad, grieving soul, family members perform rites to propitiate it. Having observed many such rites performed for relatives and non-relatives alike, I have no doubt that the rites are efficacious. Expected by loved ones to be well and happy, the individual responds. So again, this has to deal with the idea of psychosomatic healing. That because, and there are actually cases, recent cases that are attested where, in one, I recall, there were 2 guys who were in the hospital. One was about to die, the other one was fine. And the priest came in and read the final rites for the one who was fine. And that one died from the power of suggestion. Whereas the one who they didn't read the rites from, he survived on. But just this idea of, oh, I should be healthy. This bull has been sacrificed for me. We spent so much. We had to sell this land. We had to do all of this so that I could be healthy. And again, Self-Healing Power and Therapy is one of the books that you will read. And I want everyone to read that text. It's just like 100 or so pages. I want you to read that one in full, because it really brings out a lot of these ideas. That one is from the Bakongo people, but it's probably the most articulate expression of this type of idea. Lendo mo kukinyaki-sa. Aren't you happy you have a linguist teaching you? So, lendo mu kukinyaki-sa. This is power inside of, it's the same mu that you know from Ghanaian languages. Kukinyaki-sa. Self-healing. So, the power of self-healing. And it's thought that this is truly the only power that exists. So, everything else is just to humor you while you heal yourself. I mentioned before this text, Akomho Nkomobo. Conversations about Akom, he talks about different things that he actually did. And this time, he was like, who's this one? Kweku Bonsam. He was known, everyone knew him, and he was in the papers anytime he would do these great feats. So, Professor Kofi Asare Opoku, who was here, he was interviewing him. Then they transcribed the interviews. So, for some of the things that he did to heal people, he was being asked, well, what did you actually do? Right? Explain it to us. At that time, he had stopped being a Komfo. He went into Christianity. So he decided that, now I can reveal all the secrets that I swore that I would not reveal. Within 1 year, after the book came out, he died. Some would think that there may be a causative relationship. I don't know. But anyway, he gave certain examples of things that appeared in the newspapers, and he explained what he actually did. That there was this one man who they said, okay, you're going to die, you won't survive. And he said, all right, you need to bring, this bottle of schnapps, you need to bring a chicken, so forth and so on. So he brought, and he did it separately. So he brought the chicken first, then he sent him back out for a bottle of schnapps. But before that, he told him, if this chicken doesn't have intestines, you will live, and your issue will be resolved. So the guy was like, well, dang, how am I going to find a chicken that doesn't have intestines? So he's like, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. So anyway, he sent him out to go get a bottle of schnapps or whatever the thing was. And when he left, he stuck his finger into the rectum of the chicken, pulled out the intestines, ripped it out, and then hid it under a pan. And the chicken it was still alive. It survived at least that long. So when the guy came back with the bottle, he was like, okay, now we have to do the ritual. Now. So he cut the chicken open. The chicken didn't have any intestines. The guy said, oh, I'm going to live. You understand? And he was the Okonfo who had given up the practice. He said, these were things that I used that weren't true. But on a deeper level, that's the part that was true, because it reflects a deeper understanding of where healing comes from. It comes from inside. So the whole reason that I'm giving you these herbs, the whole reason why I'm doing this sacrifice, is to get your internal healing power. Everyone has this power inside of themselves that come from the Supreme Being, right? In this type of understanding of multiple selves. So you don't need anything outside of yourself to actually heal you. But let's say that you did something, a transgression against someone, you cursed someone, you treated someone wrongly, then you yourself will make yourself feel sick. So that's why when you go to a traditional healer, they'll ask you about, how's your relationship with your husband or your wife. Again, this idea that I keep bonju and it's which is we're not smarter than the person that we're divining for. You know what you did when no one else was there. There's a proverb in Chi, Onyame danseni ya honim. Onyame danseni ya ahonim. Do you understand that? Onyame danseni ya ahonim is self-knowledge. So you'll say, no one is there. How is Onyame omnipresent? Because you yourself are present as it's going on, and that is inside of you. So there's right? So no one is there to see you, but the fact that you are there, and this idea of judgment that at a certain point in time your heart will testify against you, right? That's the idea of judgment. No one was there to see you, but you yourself saw it, and you being a part of Onyame, that is the part. So let me. And this is a proverb. This is also primary research, right? It's one thing to say, oh, African people do this, they say this, but you need to have a proverb. You need to have an idiom. How do we know that this is what people think if we're not going to the written text of Medunecha, if we're not going to the oral text that's passed down, if we're not going to the Adinkra? That's where all of your articulation of what African people do should come from. You shouldn't just be pulling stuff, making stuff up out of the air, right? So that's primary research. So this is basically that idea that this self-healing power is inside of you. So I just convince you. And matter of fact, my father was saying that in the States, there's a naturopathic doctor. When you go into the office, he has a poster, and on the poster has all these gadgets and medical equipment. And at the top it says, all of these gadgets are here for me to humor you while your body heals itself naturally. So I just do this, hey, yeah, here's this gadget, are you willing to heal yourself yet? And then you say, I forgive myself for doing what I did, right? And again, this has implications for the community as well, of good social relations. There's another one in Akomhon Komobo where there's a woman who, she said something against a child who had epilepsy, right? And the child with epilepsy, her mother had spiritual powers. So she did this, the child went and asked for money that the woman owed her. And the woman just broke out and said, oh, you epileptic child, oh, you whatever. So the woman who had these spiritual powers, Beye, and again, Beye is not always seen as being something negative, right? It's like a knife. You can use it to cut vegetables, you can use it to cut throats. It's just a knife, right? So the woman who had these spiritual powers, she took the money and threw it at the woman and said, here. She threw it at the woman's child, said, here, just take it. At that moment, that child who never had epilepsy before just started to break out into these epileptic seizures. So, he asked, well, what did you do for this? Much later, the woman, the mother of this so that one who used to have epilepsy didn't have it again. The one who didn't have epilepsy now had epilepsy. So what did you do? Well, the woman who was here, he had to bring this one and this one together, for this one to apologize to that one, and then no more epilepsy. Right? And there's also, like if you look at modern phenomena, we'll come to this idea of multiple personality disorder, right? Where you can have one of the personalities who's allergic to chocolate and physically breaks out into hives when it has chocolate, the same body. And then when the other personality comes, it's just eating chocolate ice cream, chocolate bars, and there's no physical manifestation of any problem. So a lot of these things could be explained very well if you look at a composite approach to how African people see it. Maybe not only one single ethnic group, but all of them can be parts of the puzzle. So we'll come back to that. And this actually happened to me as well. This where it talks about rights and the soul grieving, right? Do you want that story?
Yeah, sure.
Sure? Okay. So for me, I was born in the U.S. I think some of you know this. But I was born in Brooklyn, New York. My parents moved down to the South. And like most people, we are taught, black people were taught to hate ourselves. So anything that appears African, we say, oh, you African this, you African that. Someone calls you African, it's time to fight. Because everything black is bad and everything is white is good. And you get this by the time you're 2 or 3 years old, right? So my parents moved down from New York, where there's a big community of Akomfo, Babalao, people who practice traditional African spirituality there, to a place where no one did. There are a lot of Africanisms and retentions, but people don't look at it like that. So here I am with my name, Albadele. Sounds very African. Oh, you're a target now. So we had an African centered preschool, but by public school, I was in with everyone else. So for me, my complexion is considered dark in the U.S. Here they're just like, oh, you're just regular. What is it? But here I'm considered dark. There I'm considered dark. So we say, you black African booty scratcher, you black this, you black that. So anyway, here I am in public school, and I have to deal with all of this. Besides the fact that we don't eat what other people eat, we don't eat any meat. It's like a taboo. We don't do it. So that's the setup. So here I am, my first day of school, all the black children, only the black children come and beat me up to jump me into the clique now. And now I'm here, all right? And I've spent so many days fighting people because they're talking about my African name, my African clothes. We do Kwanzaa, which is too African, and this, that, and the third. And again, at that time, I was like, I need to find out why we hate ourselves. I didn't think about like they hate me. I'm, as a child, thinking I look like them, and that's why they're doing this to me. They must hate themselves. So now I'm an anthropologist trying to find out what is causing these people to hate themselves. So basically from that, this is the setup. It ended up being when I'm around my parents and other people who have an African consciousness, then I can be Obadele. But when I'm in school, I need to act like how they act. If they're listening to whatever, hip-hop, whatever, I need to be listening to what they're listening to. If they want to dress like this, but what that ended up doing is it started to bring a division in the self, as opposed to being able to be one all the time. When I'm here, I'm this. When I'm there, I'm that. And eventually that got its fullest expression when I got to high school, and I stopped using my first name, Obadele, and I started using my middle name, Bakari, because it sounded less African. It sounded like Bacardi, the drink. Of course, I didn't tell myself that. I was just like, oh, I'm just doing something. But that was the actual reason behind it. I wanted something that wouldn't be whatever. And that was really a deep manifestation of now these two are splitting apart even further. And it's very difficult to continue on with these two different personalities. So I went through high school with this one, and this one was dying. The original African, this is who I am self, was being suppressed. And this one was, I was acting crazy like everybody else was acting crazy in high school. Being black as defined by white people, through the media, through the music, through the videos, they tell you this is how black people act. You're supposed to drink this. You're supposed to fight people. And that is your concept of how you're supposed to be. Then I went away to college. I got a full scholarship to Morehouse in Atlanta. So I was away from my parents now. So now this maladaptive black as defined by white personality was able to just run amok and do whatever. Oh, look at the girls there. Let's go. Oh, they're smoking weed. Let's go. Oh, they're drinking. Let's go. Right? Now, that was 1997. My mother brought me to Ghana here in 1998. We went to different shrines. We went to other places. My mother's Okompo. And at the time, I was just like, oh, that's just mom's thing, whatever. She's just doing this African thing, you know. That's irrelevant when you're in public school. That's irrelevant when you're in college. You need to do as the people are doing. But it was a very transformative experience because it did something. How do I know it did something? Because it actually manifested that when I went back for a sophomore year, that was after freshman first year, I went back for a sophomore year. I went back to doing the things that I was doing before, but this time my kra was not at peace with it. And this is where they talk about nikra jane, that the person's kra can say, I'm so sick of all this poison you're doing, all this toxicity, that it can actually leave you and leave a void. So even when you say akom, it comes from the root verb kom, which is to be empty, edampang, right? So when you say akom de me, you're saying that there's a void here in my stomach that needs to be filled. There's a void. You say akom, basically these are people who are trained to the point where they can allow this part to be empty for an obosom to come in to help people, and then it can go out and the person is fine. It requires a lot of training to do that because other people, if that happens one time, they're crazy. They can't deal with it. You put them wherever, at asylum down somewhere. So, for me, this is the point that I was getting to. So it was getting to midterm exams, and I was to write my midterms, but I was completely off doing other things. I didn't care about my grades. I was every day just going off, smoking and doing all this insanity. And it got to a point where I could actually feel what we're talking about here, where the soul is sad and it would need to be propitiated. So it was where I could see myself moving around, but I was like observing myself moving, where I went out at night driving, and I don't know how I ended up in front of the house of a woman who my mother was training with, an Okomfo named Nana Abbas in Meduma. And he would come. The time he came to the States, he came to Atlanta and he went to this person's house. I only went to her house that one time, never again. But I found myself just being driven to that place. I looked out and that's where I was. And we'll come back to this point, but I was seeing so much meaning in this. Oh, the house number is 714. I remember it to this day. Oh, 7 is significant. Oh, 14 is significant. When I got out, I made eye contact with a black dog. And I was like, oh, this is, so significant. And again, it's like I was living it, but I was observing this body moving around more than anything else. So anyway, long story short, if I can make it short, that from that point on, everything seemed upside down, where I didn't know if I was alive or if I was dead, because I was having very powerful dreams. Even before that, it's like I was seeing spirits, where before that I said that's just mom stuff. It's not real. It's just whatever. But imagine going from this is not real to now I see it. So what do I do? Or this is not real and now I hear it. Now I experience it on a very tangible level and I'm scared to death. And I'm literally like, and at one point in time, before I got to that house, I was driving on the freeway I-20 the wrong way. And here's this car coming, and here's me coming. And just at the last minute, we swerved and missed. And I had to just pull over to the side. I'm like, what's going on? What is this? This is crazy. What's going on? And when I was seeing all these spirits, I had to ask myself, did I die in that car crash? Did I actually swerve and miss it, or did I die? So anyway, all in Atlanta, there's a big African-centered community. You have people who are initiated into the Akan system, into the Wolof system, the Yoruba system, the Congo system, South Africa system. So all of my mother came down to this woman's house, and they called on the entire community to come to do rituals, to pour libations. And what they were doing is what is being said here. They had to perform rites in order to bring my soul back. Because my soul's like, I'm done with you. You're crazy. You're killing me. You're drinking this. You're doing that. I refuse to be in this body. You're not fulfilling your destiny. You're so far away from it that if you want to go that way, let's split. I will go back to Onyame, and you go the way you want to go. So eventually my soul came back, and in that time I had the most vivid dream I've ever had before. And I didn't know I was dreaming. It's like I was inside the dream, and I felt myself swimming. I felt myself swimming, and I felt myself swimming that I had to go forward. And I didn't know why. It was just an urge that I have to go forward, I have to go forward. And I kept going forward until eventually I got to an egg. And I just had another urge. I have to go inside the egg. I have to go inside the egg. And eventually I was able to break in and go inside the egg. And when I turned around, I saw all of the others who didn't make it inside of the egg. And I started to feel guilty and sad that I had chosen life and all of the rest were going to die. And then I had a second revelation that the vibrations from all of the other ones who didn't come in were there in order to make sure that I grew and survived. And that was the very first choice that I had ever made, which was to choose life. So I should never feel guilty of having chosen life. And when I look back on my life, that every single time that I chose death, I was going against that first decision. So when I was drinking this thing, I was choosing death. But my first responsibility was to continue to choose life at every single crossroads and every path. So anyway, long story short, I ended up going back to this self, all of those different selves that had split up for the sake of being in a toxic social environment. They were all forcibly within the course of 1 week brought together. And all of the stuff that I was doing before, all of my music, I had a very serious collection. You know, the first single that this one came out with, I gave it all away. I had all these posters on my wall. I ripped them all down. No one told me to do any of this. It was just that this is dead, and only this is to be born. So we talk about this Dikinga as being that life cycle, but within that life cycle, there are smaller cycles where you're reborn into initiation, you're reborn at marriage, you're reborn into eldership, you're reborn into death, and then you go through all of those again on that side, then you're reborn into birth, right? So I had gone into this initiation type of phase where now I said, all the music, all the posters, I said, I'm never drinking European liquor again. I'm not smoking anymore. I'm not chasing girls anymore. Just whatever it was that I was doing before, I said, I'm not doing any of that.
What was your posters?
It was like hip-hop posters, you know, this group or that group.
Hip-hop music?
Yeah, where people are talking about how they do this, they shoot this person, they, you know, drink this, they smoke this, they sleep with that, you know.
What about the conscious hip-hop?
At that time, you know, I would listen to conscious hip-hop, but a lot of that too was very maladaptive, where they're using the N-word. They, you know, on one song like Razkaz had this song Nature of the Threat, where he like drops all this science about, you know, the Pope and, you know, how this religion. But then the next song is, what is it? If I even remember one of these songs. You know, it's Drama, where he's talking about how he sleeps with all these women and treats them bad, and then off to the next one. So it's like when you have conscious hip-hop, one song is conscious, the next song is psychotic, the next song is conscious, the next song is psychotic, from Dead Prez to whoever. Very few groups. Now there are some groups that are out, like African insurrection music, Black Power manhood rap. Those are more on point than at that time. This is the late 90s. That was even before Dead Prez came out. And Dead Prez has its own issues as well. But anyway, just long story short, I said what I was doing before. Asked to go. Tupac was out. I listened to Tupac too. And Tupac is probably the best example of this schizophrenic. He was also a child of conscious parents. And children of conscious parents are the ones who go through similar things to what I go through. That, you know, they have this one self that is inculcated by the parents, but then they're in a toxic American environment that tells you to be black, you need to be a thug. To be black, you need to go to prison. To be black, you need to sell crack. To be black. And you get these ideas every single day, every single place you turn. So you can either have enough self-knowledge to say, no, I'm not going to do that, or you just go with the crowd and do what everybody else is doing because you don't, whatever. So anyway, to bring it all back, all those cells had to become one self. And then that began my course to learning all these different things, and I'm learning different languages and really understanding African internally. So, you know, from childhood, they say you're African, it's bad. Now I'm African, I'm like, yes. Right? That's what the whole... So again, that's talking about when you go off your destiny. It could be a bad thing, or it could be an accident, but at the same point in time, it could be a life lesson where you say, I know what that's like. So now I can stay on my life's path. Then once you get on your life's path, you see things that are much easier. You don't have the problems that you were having before. Ways open for you to do things. Yep. So anyway, so people are expected by loved ones to be well and happy like myself, and the individual responds. So I responded to it. And at one point my mother said something that was very profound. She said, you have to choose, and you chose. And you chose well. And she didn't explain what that meant, but basically I looked at that as I chose life originally, and then again I made a choice that at that point in time I would either have to choose life or choose death. And she said, you know, if there wasn't that spiritual community of all these traditional African practitioners, I would have just gone into schizophrenia. They pump you full of drugs, you'll never get better. You know, oh, you're just crazy. As opposed to we have an African understanding of what this is that happened to you. Your cells are out of alignment. You need to bring them into alignment. Then you can be reintegrated into the community as a beneficial member. Right? So it's different approaches to how to deal with these types of things, and even a different worldview to understand what these phenomena are. All right? I hope that makes some of these things clearer.
So, in the previous slide, you have something about chi.
Yeah.
Yeah, and isn't it the same as, because I've had situations where chis are being aligned. And
Right.
does it have connotations of the Far East or something like that?
No, this is Igbo.
Igbo.
It's the same word, but different cultures.
Yeah, and there is the same meaning to
Say again?
yeah, there's something about chi that I think is also not African. That is somewhere else, maybe Japanese or something.
Yeah, in China they have an understanding of qi. They have the practice of Tai Chi, which is seen as a spiritual essence that, you know, needs to be in alignment as well. And you can look to China. They have depictions of black people who traveled to China, gifts of a giraffe from Africa that were given to them. So there was interaction between continental Africans and Chinese as well, going back into ancient times. What I don't know for certain is that those are cognates that the Igbo gave it to the Chinese or anything like that, but there was documented contact. Yes?
And about the chi, when the Igbos refer to chi, are they referring to, you know, what the Yoruba also refer to? Is it
Uri?
Ori?
It's slightly different. And what I,
reading Chino and Tibi, I get the sense that when a man is growing up, he installs an object in his room where he goes to worship, where he goes to pray, and that's chi.
Right. It's seen as the chi is something that's internal, and some of these spiritual forces can be externalized. So like even when you're pouring, this is coming back to this core idea of self-healing power, that the aspect of the Supreme Being is inside of you, right? So even when you're pouring libation, it's the same thing as saying to yourself that I want to do well. So it's not, it can be externalized for ritual purposes, so you actually have to make physical movements to prove that you are serious about what you're saying. but the idea is that it's not something outside of you that causes these things to happen. It's pulling on this internal, just like how we're talking about self-healing power. When your body gives you permission to heal is when you heal.
Can you break down further the Commanders text, which is related to how the mind works?
We're actually coming to that one as well, so just very shortly. So, in this text, it talks about this quote, Nekradzi aroho. Nekradzi aroho. Good, we have someone who can say it. Please say it. Nekradzi aroho. So, this is an interesting point because it's saying re is actually another part of the human being. So if you say Nekradzi aroho, you're saying that the
will.
It's the will. It's seen as like a spiritual essence that's associated with the heart. Even when you did it, you're doing like this. So when you say Aureshim, Aureho, all of it is like the spiritual essence that resides inside of the heart. So Aurechichre, right? All of those are coming from the same concept. Now when you say Nekradzi Aureho, you're saying that the cry is, when you say ho, you're saying that something is unsettled or uncooked. You can use it in that context as well. So if you say kra, are you saying that the kra itself has a re of its own? So you can look at any of these components as also having those parts. You understand? Or you could look at it as when you say Nikrarizi areho, then you're saying that the kra's re is, this is my kra here, and then this is the kra's re that is both associated in the same body. So you can look at it at either aspect. Either kra itself has a re, or the kra's re that we're referring to is part of this whole one human being complex. Alright? So we continue. And what I wanted to show here when we were talking about this soul, and I think I have it here where I downloaded it, and I hope I do. No, I have it on my other laptop. So, I actually wanted to insert a clip. I think it's in my desktop. But in the movie Sankofa, and I'll try to bring it for you all next time. In the movie Sankofa, you have the healer Nunu. And at a certain point, she is doing a ritual. And in the ritual, she is taking these leaves, and she's touching the person on the top of their head, on this shoulder, and on this shoulder. On the next person comes, top of the head, this shoulder, and this shoulder. And it's basically what we're talking about here, where this is the balance. This is the seat of the soul, and it's also like scales. So you don't lean on a person's shoulder, because what you're doing metaphorically is you're trying to throw them off of balance. You understand? So I wanted to show that, and if you all remind me, I'll bring that clip. I actually pulled it out from the movie. Now, in the text from Ephraim Donko, he says these rites, where he talks about this same rite where you touch a person on both shoulders, reveal the location of the soul, contrary to Jeshe's assertion that the soul is lodged in the head. From the rite of restoration, it is determined that the soul is located on the shoulders, which are appropriately called krado, the place, seat, or residence of the soul. After all, the rite is intended to reestablish the soul homeostasis, and that happened to me. If you're at a home, you'll see a person who may have a spirit that doesn't want to reveal itself. You'll touch the person on the shoulders, restore that balance, and then it goes. Sometimes you'll pour water on the top of the head and on the feet, touch the shoulders, and then they're able to be rebalanced. After all, the rite is intended to reestablish the soul homeostasis with other agencies of the personality, and the shoulders signify this balance. As part of the process, the shoulders are touched with eggs when the rite is performed. Other indications of the location of the soul are the prohibitions the Akan people place on the shoulders. One must not lean upon another person's shoulders. How many people who are Akan ethnically know this to this day? Some people will just do this, chale, and they're leaning on someone's shoulders. because they've been in church every day of their life. They've never even heard of this, right? So when a shoulder is touched unwittingly, it is advisable that the other shoulder be touched for symmetry. For instance, one of the ways out of spirit possession is what we're just talking about, is tapping on the shoulders of the possessed with special vines. And that's what you saw in the Nunu clip. As I explained it to you, you'll actually see the clip when I'm able to bring it next week. But if you have the movie Sankofa, you can just look at it when they're in the cave and they're doing the initiation. Touch on the head, shoulder. You can go to any Ojura, you'll see the exact same thing. Now, what I want to bring up is this idea of diametric opposites as opposed to complementary opposites. Diametric opposites means that it's either this or that. There's a sharp dividing line and never shall the two meet. As opposed to complementary opposites of thinking that these two are like this, they complete each other, right? Now, here you have Ephraim Donko saying that the seat of the soul is the shoulders. You have Jiche saying the seat of the soul is inside of the head. Now, when you look at iconography from Kemet, you see that the Ka is here, the shoulders, and the Ba is the head that's able to fly away for dreams and other things. And what you see is that both of the two, if we're not trying to do this equal sign and say which one means soul in English, then you'll understand that both are part of this entire complex. So when you say the soul, that the seat of the shoulders, the soul seat is on the shoulders, what is on your shoulders other than your head, which is sitting right here in between these two? And this is why it's necessary sometimes to, one, not think like Europeans that it has to either be that one or that one, it can't be both. That, and then also part of understanding that sometimes it's necessary to do a comparative study in order to fully understand what's being done in this single culture. So if Jeche or Ephraim Donko read Medu Netra, they could see this and they could see this, and then it would make sense of this. This is on my shoulders. So the Yoruba are talking about Ori, the Akana talking about Krado. What is it but this and this combined, the Ka and the Ba? And in Kemet, they would also talk about the Ka-Ba as this complex of these two forces that are related. You understand? So again, looking at other African people sometimes even sheds light on whatever my own culture that I come from is. Right? Yeah?
I have two things.
Feel free.
There's an idea of shoulder to lean.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've seen it. I don't remember where I saw it, but it's quite a popular idea.
Yeah.
Somebody says shoulder for something.
Yeah.
That has it not directly contradict
Yes, it does.
this principle
Yes.
that I'm talking about.
And it's an English idiom,
Yeah.
which will let you know why it does, because it's not coming from a worldview that this is seen as this, that this is seen as a scale. So when I'm saying, oh, this is a shoulder to lean on, it's first, and this is again why I'm saying that when you're talking about something African, you should bring in African proverbs, you should bring in African idioms, you should bring in African adinkra and all these other things. When you're looking at the European worldview, that's where you should bring in European idioms, and you will find that what Europeans say about how the world works is very different from how Africans say the world works. So even the idea of God versus the devil, where you have one supreme being that's all good, the other one that's all evil, as opposed to an African view where everything is part of the supreme being and the supreme being is part of everything. You understand? Or even the idea of man versus nature. You understand? That's a very European concept, and it's rooted in where they were, where they don't have abundance of anything. So, you know, you have to fight against nature to survive. So it brings about, and we'll deal with Serhante Job's two cradle theory, where he talks about a lot of these European ideas finding their expression, and they actually will say it, or where they'll say something like, only the strong survive, survival of the fittest. These are the idioms that you would use in order to understand how Europeans view the world. But if you want to know how Africans view the world, you don't try to take shoulder to lean on, and now let's say, how does it fit in the African context? It doesn't, because it's not coming from the African context.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then additionally, Kwame Jichi's association of the soul with the head. Something I remember vividly, he picked it from Becca. Right?
Yeah.
That if he had gone to the actual source, he would have
Exactly.
arrived at a better conclusion.
Yeah. And
I'm
this.
very grateful to you that you have led me out. I mean, he's an old man with respect, but this is clearly a very serious error.
The TE has always debated Descartes. Throughout his academic.
This is the thing. It's one thing to think that Europeans are wrong, but not to know anything other than what Europeans have said. Right? So if all I've studied is Thales, Socrates, Plato, like we were talking about Conscientism, where every Aristotle, all you are citing is European scholars. There's this saying that the one who determines the diameter of your knowledge determines the circumference of your activity. So if all I know is this European world, where am I going to go but inside of this? But if I know this entire African world, not only the continent but also the diaspora, because a lot of things that aren't even done on the continent anymore, they're still doing it and they're still explaining it in the diaspora. You go to Cuba, that's where Yoruba people say, oh, that's where I'm finally understanding what this thing is. So again, a composite view of all of the African world can help understand these teeny tiny fragments. We'll actually come back to this point when we talk about schizophrenia. And schizophrenia is understood as focusing on this teeny tiny fragment as though it's the most significant thing in the world. But that's what we find ourselves doing in scholarship, being schizophrenic to the point of just focusing on this teeny tiny thing and we can't see this whole. All right? And this is also why I think that middle nature should be taught from primary as well. Because even when I'm teaching UGRC, they've never heard of anything that their ancestors wrote and carved in stone. But they've heard of everything that random Europeans who went to study in Kemet either plagiarized or wholly made up. So anyway, that's the point here. Connecting the fragments can make the whole picture clearer. Do we see this well? What is this? Africa map. Yeah. What do you notice about this map? Say again? Right. Why is that?
Well, I think. Where you go?
No.
I'm still waiting my.
I'm just using an artist aspect. Now, if you look at the map of Africa, then the west is this way. But if we're on the continent, then our west should be somewhere else. That's what I'm thinking. Because we're here. If you look at it, this is what it is. But if we're here, over here, then it means this. We're not looking at it from the outside, but we're looking at it from the inside. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay, thank you. Any other ideas?
What I know is that there is an African map. It's directly opposite to what we know in the world today. So the map of the world should rather be what we know to be in this. Yeah, so that's what
Good. Koto?
Well, I think, aligning my mind to what Eric said, then, so when you consider European studies of cartography and map reading, a lot of the parts of Africa is actually cut bits and pieces and then rearranged. So you don't have a complete, as we really assert in the book, the idea of Africa, you don't have a completeness of what Africa is. It's a puzzle that the European tried to unravel, but as to how that has come to be it's a question mark. Because then, at first, then was trying to design Africa on paper. So we have, which has to do with a kind of building knowledge systems out of bits and pieces that will bring Africa together.
Thank you. Let me actually pull something else up for you. We'll escape from here and let me try to show. I think it's in this one. Right here. Okay. So in Kemet, that's what we have here. The word for east was the word for left.
The word for
East was the word for left.
Okay.
Yabi. Right? And that's what you have here. That's what you see here. And this is, oh, you're not seeing it yet. So this is from a different presentation that I gave, but I think you'll see. So in Kemet, and you'll see it carved here. This is a spear decked out as a standard. And you see Yabit as east. You see Yabi as left, that the two were seen as being associated. Right? And this is how you would write it.
Remember, I think I picked that from your talk on writing mathematics.
Yeah, that was in there. Yeah, that was in there. So here you find also, and I wanted to give you actual carvings, so you're not just like, oh, it's in a book, but in the carvings you can see the same thing. Imanet, and that's what you see here, where Imanet is west, and then also right hand. So Imanet west, and related word right or right hand. So east is on your left, as you saw, and west is on your right. Right? And beyond that, let's continue. And we'll see this here. This is a carving of the temple at Konsu, where you see your east on your left, you see your west on your right hand side. Also, you'll note that north is lower. So when they're talking about the Delta region, close to the Mediterranean, they refer to it as Lower Kemet, Ta Mehu. Ta Mehu. And it can be represented by a clump of papyrus with the buds bent down. All right? So that's lower. When you're talking about the north, you're talking about what is down. It's also in relation to elevation, but we've already seen that east is left, west is right, and south is upper. So they refer to it as Upper Kemet. And I found it so interesting, like here in Ghana, when people are giving you directions, they give you directions based on elevation. This is atomic, that's atomic down. I say this is so Kemetic, but people don't even know that correlation. So you find here as well, Resu, where Resu is the south, and that is also Shamon, Upper Kemet, or Egypt as they right here. So you can see it like this, you can see it with that one.
It doesn't have anything to do with the source of Nile getting to
Yes. So for the Nile to even get there, again, we're talking about elevation. So this is upper, and it's going down to the sea, which is sea level lower. So, and it's also when you're talking about the east is left and the west is right, that means that where you're facing is where you came from, further into the south. And what your back is facing towards is what's irrelevant. You understand? So also in Kemet, they would say that they came from the source of the Hapi River, right? where the two Niles meet. They say it's the first nome to Wawat. Wawat was one of the ancient names of a place inside of Nubia. Right? So we'll return to what we're talking about. But that's why the map is right side up. And you'll find that Europeans, what they did is they flipped. This was the original one. Europeans decided that they want a map where they are on top, and arbitrarily just decided to do it as we know it today. So here you have a sphere, but they've told you this is the top of the sphere. And they also do a Mercator projection map where Europe seems huge. And Greenland seems huge. And then, so you have the Peterson projection map, which is more accurate, but it's still upside down, where it puts Europe on the top, as opposed to putting it at the bottom, which is where our African ancestors saw it. So this was the first concept of the orientation of the planet. The sun rises on our left-hand side, and it sets on our right-hand side. This is upper, and that is lower to our back. So we come back.
But we make our students draw these now every year.
Yeah, upside down. And we haven't said anything about it.
Not challenge it.
How many people you know?
So there it's then I studied European esoteric and a foundational thought to their building, and I was interested in studying. I studied a bit of the longitude and the latitude. I realized that most of the things that were of ancient texts, they had been rearranged.
Yeah.
They had been
Upside down.
For example, the order of the quest, or the setting to the cardinal point of the West, for example, is a key thing.
Right.
So that they become the West, and all the others, are subsumed to their discretion. All this.
As opposed to the African concept in Kemet, the West was representative of death, and that's where you buried the dead, going towards the western side. So when we want to be like the West, what are we doing really?
Because in the esoteric mysteries, when you talk about the North, it's something that has to do with not lower, but things that have to do with deliberation, things that are of insignificant, insignificant.
Yeah. Yes, feel free.
So does that mean that the picture from space that shows the other side, they are all lies in order to support the agenda?
So here is the planet, and here is my satellite. So from this side, it looks like this, as we see here. This is my satellite looking at the Earth. Now I flip my satellite here, and now it looks like what you've seen before. The Earth hasn't done anything different from what it's doing, but your view, I've chosen to present the picture in such a way that Europe appears on top. It's a sphere hurtling through space, right? So if I want to look at the sphere with my satellite and then show you a picture and show it in this way, I could show it that way. If I want to flip my satellite upside down, the Earth isn't flipping. My satellite and my camera is flipping. It would be like, I have a camera here. I'll try to make this plain so that we can all understand. We'll have a group picture. I think you're getting the points.
Does that mean that we are really turned upside down?
Yes, your world has been turned upside down. Your understanding of your place in the world is the exact opposite. So now, this is you. I should turn it on first. Oh, you know what? I'm using the other one. The cameras are plenty. But I think this will make the point very vivid for everyone. Okay, so this is you. You are the planet. Your head is the planet. Right? Oh, did it go? Let me come back for you. So this is his head. His head is the planet. Like this. Right? This is what I'm showing you now. Right side up. Now, the planet hasn't done anything different, but I've taken my satellites. I'll flip my satellite upside down to show it as you've seen all throughout your life. And anytime I show you a picture, I show you a picture like this, where Europe is here. This is Europe on your t-shirt, and this is Africa on your face. So every single time I show you a picture, I make sure, oh, hold on, flip the satellites. Yes.
Well, recently I was watching one guy went to space and took selfie. And there was Africa below. It seems, I don't know where their space station is. I think it's above. So there to and you could see that shape of Europe and Africa. So
That's because they had their satellite like this. They had their camera like this. They're in space. They could take a picture and flip it like this. And then when you see Africa, you'll see it on its side. They could do it like this. Then when you see Africa, it will be right side up. Then they could flip it like this. But they've decided, hold on, we're floating through space. Let's orient it to look like it's a ball. So, and the ball isn't changing. The only thing that's changing is me in relation to the ball. So I'm saying, let's turn it this way. Now I see, and this is Africa. Now I see Africa like this. Now I see Africa upside down as you know it. Now I see Africa right side up as it is here. The ball hasn't done anything different than it's been doing for the past few billion years. You understand? I hope it's clear.
Assuming this agreement is like that, how do you use the longitude and latitude to explain the climatic condition of each of them if we maintain this the way it is?
It's still the same.
Really?
It's still the same. The equator is still the equator. It's still the part that's closest to the sun. It's just which one are we saying is the top and which one are we saying is the bottom. The center is going to be the center no matter what I'm doing.
Yeah, I agree. But in terms of changes within the place
That's what I'm explaining. That no matter where you are, the center is going to be the center, and that's the part that's closest to the sun. And being that it's closest to the sun, so here I have your head is now the sun. All right? So this part is closest to the sun. This part is further away from the sun. This part is also not close to the sun. This is the closest point to the sun. So the sun is wherever it is. No matter what I'm looking at, whether I say this is top or bottom, the center is always going to be the center. So they can't flip the center. Right? But what they can do is say, and the South Pole is cold, the North Pole is cold, because neither part is closest to the sun. Both of them are further back away from the sun. So it's a very intentional and arbitrary decision to say, this part that's cold, we'll just put it on top. That part that's cold, we'll put it on the bottom. But the center is still going to be the center, and what's closer to the sun is hotter. And the further away you get from the center, which is the equator, the cooler it will get. You go to South Africa, it's cool. You go to Minnesota, it's cool. No matter where you're south or north. And then also, I mentioned the Mercator projection map. We're actually doing a big detour away from our topic today. But the Mercator projection map is also an intentional botching of the map, where places in Europe in the northern hemisphere are intentionally made to look larger than they actually are. So if you're looking at things based on percentage of land mass, Greenland looks about the size of Africa, when really it's a teeny tiny island. So there have been concerted attempts by academics to use the Peterson projection map. So Mercator projection was intentionally, let's make the north look bigger than it is. let's make Canada look like the size of Asia, right? And then the Peterson, they say, all right, and you'll see that one looks much more elongated, but it's more consistent with actual land mass. So you'll see Greenland looks like the teeny tiny little island that it actually is. But they still haven't turned it right side up. I hope people are following along. Yeah? So again, all of these are how your enemy intentionally uses psychological warfare and presents it as the truth. Right? If you think that Europe is on the top, then you think Europe is on the top. If you think Africa is on the bottom, then you think Africa is on the bottom. So they say, if we want to make Europe seem to be at the top, let's look at the sphere and flip the camera upside down. Every single time we show it from space, we'll show it upside down. And even if you saw it, you would say, why have they turned my picture upside down when you see it like this? Not knowing that this was the original way of seeing the orientation of the planet. But if you tell the lie enough, it may not become the truth, but people will believe it. So we continue, and this is Al-Kebulan as it's written here, but then you see everything written upright, showing as it would have been in 1260. We continue. So one thing that you find consistent throughout is offerings of food and libation to the Ka in recognition of its power to reward and punish. And we find the same thing, the same propitiation is done to the Kra, to the Ori, where you would actually even wash your hair. You would have amongst the Akang, Kradgarye, right? You would have your Krada where you would do washing, purification, fasting, all these things. You are washing the river associated with your father. All these things were done. Because again, there's the idea that the Kra can either reward you or punish you. And it's like if you're nailing something, you have your hammer and you have your nail, then you pop, 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 bam! And then you hit your hand. No one is to blame other than you. But if you're thinking about it from this way, you may think, what did I do that made my head, leave me for that split second where I'm now in pain? And then you may say, you know what, I need to correct my behavior. I need to stop talking bad to people. Or when I told that woman her hands look like a vulture. Now I've hit my hand and it looks like a vulture. So whatever it is, it's a self-correcting thing. So again, you can see, how do we behave towards each other when we don't look at it like that? Then we go into MPs' houses and we stab them to death. But when we are looking at it like this, we're thinking, how can I make sure that I treat people well so that I don't go against my own self? I'm walking in the dark and then I fall into a gutter somewhere. If you are looking at it this way, you would say, why did I do things in that way? What did I do that caused my own head to say, my own Ori, which is there to see for me, it decided not to see this thing for me? Perhaps because it had been transgressed or it had not been properly rewarded for things it had done for me. And even to come back to the head and the shoulders part, that in Akana would say, miti ayeye, miti. Hey, oti ayeye. Or in Yoruba, they have the same concept. Oshe orire. So a head of blessing. Wash orire, you'll do a head of blessing. Again, the same aspect that we can find in the Ka and in the Ba put together. So even when we're saying this is the seat of the soul, we're still talking about this whole complex. And then you can also look at the traditional stool as a similar thing. So when we say, this Sikaja Kofi is the soul of Asante, where did I put my... that you still see the seat of the soul. And they use this in architecture a lot as the exact same as the Ka, exact same as the Kra, that they're showing that this is the seat. And then this is what sits on Uti A Ayeye, your head, which has done well, is what is sitting on this thing. And that's also part of the reason why, you have these stool houses, right? Because that is the seat, and this is similarly the seat, and what is sitting on the seat. So this is important, this is also important. and we shouldn't say this is it, not that, or this is it, not that. Let me let you keep your head and I'll cut your shoulders off. Or vice versa. Let me let you keep your shoulders and I'll cut your head off. But if you're thinking about it like an African, you'll think all of these are complementary aspects of the whole, and all of them are necessary. As opposed to, I'm thinking about like a European, which one is the soul? It's like Europeans coming here and trying to find which one of your obosom is going to be the devil when we translate it. So amongst the Yoruba, they looked at Eshu, who rewards people who do well and punishes those who don't do well. They say, okay, so Eshu will be the devil. Then they put an equal sign, and now people are even changing their name so that they don't have Eshu in it. And they've completely erased the indigenous understanding of what Eshu was. They wiped away the entire understanding of what Olorun was and replaced it with the Christian version. Here's a white man sitting up in the sky. You're telling me if I do well, then I can go be oppressed by another white man there? That's my reward? So Sasa Bonsan was said to be a spirit in the forest, that those who transgress the forest would also be, taken care of. So let's say you're not supposed to go hunting on a specific day. They would say if the hunter doesn't come back, they would say he must have done something, either to a sacred grove or to one of the animals that has a spirit that isn't supposed to be molested, right? So again, Sasa Bonsam is where they get the Obonsam as being the devil from, but originally it was part of this entire panorama of those who are there to keep the order. But now you go out and you destroy the forests, you leave holes and you do your alluvial gold mining, and there's no Sasa Bonsam to take care of you, right? Yeah.
Talking about offerings, sacrifice, usually there are few things we daily enjoy as human beings. Like human sacrifice.
Yeah.
Some are saying it was misinterpreted. They were not sacrifice but punishments. But I'm just asking if this, they were really not punishment but sacrifice. What thought testifies that?
Yeah, so you have there were punishments, but then there was also human sacrifice. You can go all the way back to ancient Kemet, where and there are two things. Oftentimes it would be in a royal household, and we can look at Akom Hong Komobo, where in that case they would have a time where any ruler who would ascend to the stool would last 1 week and die. And I will come back to the human sacrifice, but I want to elucidate this point. So they say, what is causing this? They're only there for 1 month. This one dies. Like 7 of them, all of them die that way. So Professor Kofi Asarapoku asked, what did you do to remedy the situation? Because now I know that the ruler of this town is there and nothing has happened. He said, let me tell you what I did. I went there, I got a pot. I took the head of a sheep and poured all the blood in it. Then I put other scary looking things inside of it. So you have the sheep's skull, you have blood, you have all of these other cowrie shells, blah, blah, blah. Then he buries it beside the river. And he says, you all wait. We will make sure that this is taken care of. So he comes back 6 months later, whatever the time was, let's say 6 months later. And he tells the people, I now know what has happened. It was Abeifo, and they buried something in the town. And this thing that they buried in the town is what has been causing the rulers to die. So everyone, oh wow. So then he says, follow me. So he goes where? To the riverside. He goes to the riverside and he notices the spot, and he takes a staff and he says, I found you out, Abeifo. He breaks under the ground because it had been covered up by the silt from the river. He breaks it open and people see it and they say, oh wow, look at this terrible thing that they've buried here in the soil. Then they see what looks like a human head. They'll see a skull in there. It's actually a sheep's head. They see all this bloody looking stuff. They're like, wow, this is terrible. And he says, I found you out. Wherever you buried that thing, that the river has brought it here. Right? And he says, if you do this again, I will come and I will finish all of you. No more rulers died in the town. Right? So what you have is a very practical solution to a problem that they may not have been able, and he said that there were like 10 other Akomfo who came before him, and he was the only one who was able to use Nyansa, the wisdom, to find out how to prevent them from doing it. But then you look at other places where you have, like when a royal dies, the ruler dies, where they would sacrifice all the people in the royal household. That was with the same idea, that when you had a ruler who would die, this ruler who would die, usually it would be someone inside of the royal household who wants that ruler to die so that her child can inherit. Or someone, not necessarily a woman, the man says, oh, when this ruler is done, then this, my best friend, will be the ruler. So usually the plots, and you can look at ancient Kemet, I want to say Ramesses II, Amenemhat definitely was one who was killed. But you have this thing where they instituted that all of those who are in the royal court would be killed and they would be buried in order to serve the ruler in the afterlife. And once that was instituted, you had rulers who were living for very long periods of time. Because now, as opposed to everyone wanting that person to die so this person can ascend, they said, no, we don't want him to die. Let's make, did you sneeze? Oh, let me help you. So again, it's a very practical way of looking at it. So you've taken a practical situation, but now you can extend that analogy to other things where people say, well, just like the idea of the human being a living son, you have people who would actually say, I want to join the ruler, right? I want to go and serve the ruler when the ruler goes. So you had other people who weren't even part of the retinue, but they're saying that on the other side, just as we know when the sun sets, it doesn't stop existing. When I die physically, I will still exist on the other side and I'll be reincarnated, along with that. So again, it comes from the worldview and the idea. So again, it's not necessarily say it's good or bad, but it's very useful for obtaining that specific objective of making sure that this person isn't killed anymore. And you find in different societies, usually the reason why they first instituted that is because you had rulers who were dying. After that, no more dying. Yeah?
With regard to the same question,
Mhm.
from another point of view, from both African religious concept and even juxtapose that with Christianity, you see, among the accounts, sometimes maybe certain misfortune or things happen in communities, then maybe the gods, the priest will come and say maybe they need a sort of a person to dedicate himself as an atonement for the community.
Yeah.
So among the fancies, for example, there is a festival called Awa, where one agent will have to commit himself so that he will sacrifice to ensure that certain plague that affected them after their migration from the German stopped. The same concept is replicated in the Christian religious system. Jesus Christ himself was also sacrificed, form of a human sacrifice, but atoning for the sins of the followers, of which they do today. So sometimes when somebody tells me Africans do human sacrifice, I ask them, do you even understand your Christian concept of Christ dying on that cross to atone for your sins? So that argument, yes, that's what you say.
Let's come back to this same concept, cooking yakisa. Who remembers this concept? It should be in your notes, cooking yakisa. You will learn Kikongo.
Book about self-healing.
Exactly, so this is self-healing. The cookie means something that you've done to yourself. Then yakisa is the healing part, so self-healing. When, again, looking at this text, I'll come home, come aboard, and then actually having been a practitioner of it as well, that it's the idea that whatever is going to heal you on an individual level or heal the community on a collective level, it has to have something that makes a person say, I should be healed. So let's say that I have to dedicate a ram in order to get, they say, oh, you're sick. You have whatever the sickness is. You have to bring a ram. You're bringing all this money. This ram is going to lose its life. You see the blood pouring. There's something inside of you with the expectation. They have this idea of self-fulfilling prophecy. That if this thing is going to die so that I feel well, I better feel well. If my family is going to sell off all this land to be able to deal with all of these things and these rituals, I had better feel well. And it's again the same idea of the efficacious nature of how we're going to heal the community. So let's say in the community there is thievery, or people are dying, or children are getting sick, or whatever, and there may be ill vibes or whatever that we think is causing it. We say we need a human sacrifice. So amongst the Yoruba, all over the continent, people do it. So now, let's say that one of us was behind whatever was going on, even if it was just through our ill thoughts of wanting everyone to suffer or whatever. Now this person has been sacrificed. This is what will convince the entire community that this thing must stop. So anything that you may have been doing subconsciously to contribute to whatever the affliction in the community was, we know that this has happened, so we are going to enforce not only our individual self-healing power, but we'll use that on a collective basis as well. So when you go to an Okonfo and you have this problem, they will tell you, bring this, bring this, bring this. Amongst the Yoruba, usually whatever the thing is used in order to solve your problem. You understand? So they say, like even in the story that I mentioned last time, that the things that you were supposed to bring are 1,000 needles, 1,000 pieces of cloth. Now you use that thing in order to solve what your problem is. But the fact that it's something that is so taxing for you to bring, or at least it has enough of a psychological impact on you to say, this thing had better work. And that's also what they talk about in science as the placebo effect, right? So you have people who weren't given the medicine at all, but they feel better. They have whatever the disease was, the cancer is in remission now, right? But they say, oh, that's not the science part. But if you're African, you say that is the science part, because that is the part that is actually causing you to be healed. And if you really want to be scientific, then you will do research into what caused that person to be healed, and how can that be replicated, how can that be enforced to the community. So as Africans, that's what we did, and that's why you see things as they are, because we went into what's inside of you that causes you to heal yourself. And where did it come from? Did it come from your father, from your mother, from the Supreme Being? But something inside of you caused you to heal. We have to continue though. So punishment as a necessary sanction to keep the individual on the path of striving towards the realization of his or her destiny. So as we talk about these things, we're talking about the Kra can reward or punish. So let's say for me, the example I gave you from my own life, my soul punished me just by saying I'm out. And in ancient Kemet, they had one of the most famous literary texts, a conversation, some call it a dispute between a man and his Ba. Has anyone ever read that or come across that before? A dispute between a man and his Ba. Ba like that.
It is even within our country.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like you and your cry.
This is what we're talking about, right? So we're talking about the Kra. You can say Nikra Jani, and I'm saying for me, that's how we would understand what happened to me. My Kra left, it left Akom, this place at Dampine. Now anything can come in and take the place. And now I'm seeing what's going on, but it's like an out-of-body experience. That in this conversation between a man and his Ba, we should be doing this as literature, even from children, so that we can understand the world. But that's a sidebar. That the man is complaining about life. He says, oh, things are so terrible, oh, blah, blah, blah. Eventually his Ba speaks up, says, if you keep going on like this, I will leave you. He says, oh, hey, hey. So that's one of the ways that your Kra or your Ba can punish you. It can just say, I'm not going to do anything to you. I'm going to leave you to your fate. And now whatever your path was that was associated with your Nkrabia, because the Kra is what holds on to your Nkrabia, your destiny. So now that which was aligning you, keeping all these different selves together, now is gone. So now you're off onto whatever path, right? So the same thing with the Ba, and again the Ba and the Ka as a concept, as being complementary parts of this necessary whole, right? So we continue. This one also talks about Krabin, which is described as whitish, grayish, or yellowish, and it's said to be expelled at death. So when a person dies, oftentimes they will discharge from their rectum, because what was keeping it tight is no longer keeping it tight. It will come out. Or a person is hit by a car, you'll have an expulsion from here, from there, right? So basically this is seen as being the physical manifestation that the kra is actually inside of the person. And this is the exact same concept in Kikongo, this idea of Luvemba. You remember the cosmogram that the Luvemba is that gray side here. It's seen that when your hair starts to turn white, when you go to old people and there's a bit of a smell in their room, that all of that is seen as that Luvemba that's building up. And this is that whiteness of death. And the more that builds up, eventually the person dies on. They pass on, but all of these things are seen as that whitish, grayish expulsion from the kra. And that's also why this impemba, or shri, this white clay, is seen as being sent from the ancestors, because what was coming out inside of you there, from the realm of the ancestors, you go to the riverbed, they're sending this as healing white clay, impemba mpolo. All right? And again, this is a worldview, and it's a way of looking at things based on wisdom, having learned from experience. So we know what it's like not to think about things that way, or at least we know it now, because now people don't think about it that way, and now look at our environment. And the same krapa is also called musuyidye, the thing that you use to remove musyu, which is calamity, catastrophe, so-called evil. So yet the Akan also believe that the soul can be put to flight, and you can do the fancy for me. Nikragren. Egren. Has run away. So I would say Adjane. So it's flight putting the individual under threat of imminent demise, and that's what happened to me, where I had to choose between life and death, because my kra said, if you're going to do this, I'm out. But imagine if I don't have African people who see it and they say, just put him in a room, lock him up, tie him, and fill him up with drugs. I would not have had an opportunity to do my PhD. I would not have an opportunity to teach this class, because they don't even understand what's going on. The people who've been on the planet for the longest period of time may have a deeper view than the children of the planet of what's actually going on. All right? So it's flight putting the individual under threat of imminent demise. This notion is predicated upon the understanding that the soul can be grieved, as shown above, or as I even gave you an example of. Such an encounter requires the soul to be brought back or restored by offering a sacred meal to anyone believed to be in such a state. It must be stressed that failure to recognize and treat such a depressed condition leads to melancholia and may ultimately lead to death. The first step in addressing this religious psychological condition is for the individual to recognize that the soul is in flight, and we also mentioned this root verb of kom, akom, ekom, controlled or uncontrolled separation between the kra and the rest of the other elements. So if it's uncontrolled, it's like what I mentioned happened to me. And if you read African Spirituality on Becoming Ancestors, he gives an example of this happening. It's uncontrolled. The person isn't saying, oh, let me let it go so that this can happen. But you can have people who are, again, trained to do that, that I can let my soul or whatever go outside. I can take in this. I can give any messages to the community. You should be married. You should do this. You should make a sacrifice. Boom. I go, and now the spirit goes, and now I'm back. And there's no anything seamless, right?
Yeah. I want to ask this flight, the kra going away from there. It will mean that then the kra and then yourself, there's no correlation because you are doing something that the kra does not like. So,
the kra has already left. And if they want to go back onto their own path, they would have to get their kra to come back. So there's a concept, that no one was given a bad quote unquote in Krabya. So when you see them doing that, they're off their path. So they've let their kra go, and they're basically in a state of walking death. Everything that they do. And in the instructions of Batahotep, they talk about there are those who don't have wisdom, who live on the things which cause one to die. So people who are doing that, they are drinking things that are death. They are eating things that are death. They are smoking things that are death. Everything that they do is taking them towards a path of death. So their kra has abandoned them a long time ago. But in an African conception, there's a way for them to be reconciled, for them to be brought even back into the community as, right, upright citizens. So the human being isn't seen as being essentially evil, that they've been doing things that have thrown the community out of balance. So things can be done to restore that person to balance and therefore to restore the community to balance. This is what we mentioned before, a dispute between a man and his ba, and this is a translation from Lichtan. I opened my mouth to my ba. Too great, this is too great for me today. My ba will not converse with me. It is too great for exaggeration. It is like deserting me. My ba shall not go. It shall attend to me in this. I said, I will not go as long as this is neglected. Surely if you run away again, the ba can say, I'm done with you. You are terrible. I'm out. Let me go back. Surely if you run away, you will not be cared for. And this is what he's trying to say to his ba to convince it to stay. Oh, no one will take care of you. You will not be cared for. Every criminal says, I shall seize you. So they'll see his ba and say, let me take this ba. Right? Though you are dead, your name lives. Yonder is the place of rest, the heart's goal. The west is a dwelling place, a voyage. I really hate these types of translations into this archaic type of English when it's much closer if we were translated into African languages or even black English. So it said, it is like deserting me. It is like when you use the word se, which is like, or like in black English, you say, she be like, out. As opposed to going to, and then it said, thou hast done whatever. So it's like, here is the African language here, here's the classical African language here, and we go all the way to the Queen's English there to come right back down to where we were. So hopefully some of you will be learning Medu Neter and you'll be translating some of these texts into every African language. So I've started on Akan for instructors of Patahotep. Gimni, I've already finished translating that one. That one is a fragment. But hopefully others. The Book of Coming Forth by Day, the way that they were able to destroy everyone's mind is making sure you all have copies of the Bible in your own language. So the foundation is this diametric opposites. Here is an all good God who's white, and here is an all bad devil who's black. As soon as they get you that is the foundation of European thought.
The Gideon's Bible.
Any of them. Any of them. Yeah.
There's, in relation to this idea of a man in a dispute with his chief, there's an evil short story of a man called Nza who got overfed, decided to challenge his chief.
Yeah.
So, just in support of
yeah.
the idea.
So again, all this comes back to the main idea of multiple selves, and they can be in alignment or they can be out of alignment, right? So we continue. Yes. Feel free.
We're talking about the body leaving the body.
Yeah.
So that means the person will eventually die, right? So
Basically, waking death. They're still moving around, but for all intents and purposes, they're doing everything.
those who have their soul within them.
Yeah. So it's kind of like when they talk about out-of-body experiences, and that's actually something that's covered inside of the chapter as well. But basically the idea that there are different parts that can go away, like your dream self can go away. So like your sum amongst the Akan, the sum can go and come back. The Kra can leave and allow an Obosom to come in, do whatever. So there are these different aspects that are all combined into one. But upon death, for example, all of them go back to where they came from. So the Kra goes back to Onyame. The Sum becomes Osamai and goes to the father's house. The Moja, it becomes Hunam, which is the physical body. But when it dies, it goes back to the earth. Everything goes back to its source. But in reincarnation, amongst the Akan, the Sum, which has become Osamai, and the Kra are reunited. You have a different physical body. And sometimes even that will have aspects that were existing previously, like marks on the face, all those types. Birthmarks, some of those can also come back. But again, you have a reunification of at least two of these multiple selves. So the Osamai will again become Intro, and then it will become the Sum of the person that will have all your traits, your characteristics, and whatever. And the Kra is the reason why. So everyone will retain your Nkrabia from the last life. So even if you're born on Monday, we'll still call you Nanakofi. You understand? Because you've retained the same Kra and you've retained the same Nkrabia. And that's one of the reasons why they say Nkrebe ni kwatibia. And it's to say that the destiny does not have a manner of avoidance. So even if you need to die and come back again, all right, so you want to try it again, take 2. Or you don't, you want to try it again, take 3. And that goes back to Kemet as well, where they have this idea of someone who can get to a point where they've fulfilled all of their things. They become what's called Ak Ikwa, which is an excellent, shining, bright spirit. So they've fulfilled their mission, their destiny. So like Imhotep would be an example of that. So he doesn't need to reincarnate. A person can choose to come back in order to help others, but they can also ascend. And that's also the idea behind the pyramids, that the pyramids are in alignment with the imperishable stars that never set beyond the horizon. So you always see them, they never die. So the idea is that if you do the pyramids in alignment with those stars, the soul of the ruler will go and join those stars and will live for eternity, right? So these are concepts that, again, seeing the composite of the entire African world will help us understand any one fragment. If we only look at Kemet and we don't look at, other more recent ones, we may get lost. And that's like the white people who study Egyptology. They try to look at it in relation to Shakespeare, Antigone and all this other stuff, but they don't have an African worldview where they can see these comparisons. Things only make sense in relationship to each other. How far away is this from that? Now I can get some depth perception on where everything is located. Or trying to look at things with one eye. I can't see how far away you are, but I open the other one. Now I can get a very good view of all these things in 3D. So we continue. Our time is short. So the Ba of ancient Egyptian philosophy here is the spirit, the soul, or the double, which comes out of the body of the deceased at the moment of death. This ephemeral entity is represented sometimes as a tiny bird, sometimes as a shaft of light rising from a vase of oil. That's this one. To watch over the dead body as the deceased transmits from one life to the next. That's Obenga in African philosophy. So separation, this is, does anyone know this? Adinkra at the top right. We're supposed to be literate here at the university, so we should be able to read and write beyond Latin characters. I'm very serious. Right? For us to graduate and we can't read anything in any African script, any African language, would be a travesty. All right, but this is called sunsum. Sunsum, right? So the ability to separate from the physical body is also attributed to a person's shadow or dream body. So Amansiakan is the sunsum that leaves and the sunsum that comes back. And sunsum is said to be summusum, darkness inside of darkness. And it makes sense that that would be the part that is the dream part. You'll sleep at night, so everything is dark. So here, this thing that in light, in sunlight, you can see exactly where my shadow is. But in dark, this one blends with all the other shadows. You understand? So it's thought that that shadow has now joined this greater collective shadow, and now they're all interacting, right? That in modern reports of this experience, people sense the essential or thinking part of themselves to leave the physical body. This might suggest that the double is in some way associated with the shadow or dream self, or that it may in some traditions take on a similar role. Now this also happened to me around the same time of everything else, so this is stuff that I thought didn't actually exist, but I had like a dream type of state where I felt myself floating. So I was upstairs in my room, but I felt myself floating downstairs, and I'm seeing everything as vivid in clear color as anything. And then I started to feel like, what's keeping me up? And I felt like there were hands on me. I couldn't see any hands, but I felt these hands on me, and that's what was keeping me floating. And I said it was very uncomfortable. I wanted to shake them off. So I woke up, and I still felt these hands on me. So imagine going from none of this exists to I feel these hands on me. What is this? Right? You have to have an African understanding. Otherwise, just take whatever these drugs are that they give you and go off. Please.
How about when we have called in fancy, you call it munuku?
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're asleep and there is something on you.
Mm-hmm.
Is that also...
Omununkum. Do you know what the word omununkum actually is? That's the word for cloud. Mm-hmm.
I like when a spirit enters your
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing?
No.
I would say it depends on the context in terms of what the ultimate goal is, because some of these things they may seem bad right then, but it can lead to greater enlightenment, greater understanding, and greater fulfillment in alignment with your path. So there's an idea that bonina papa frimoba is to say that goodness can come out of something that on the surface looks to be evil. And if you read Self-Healing Power and Therapy, he describes it beautifully in the form of a magnet. So here you have a bar magnet. This side is positive, this side is negative, right? And this looks like it's all good, and this side looks like it's all bad. If you were a child, that's how you would think. But cut that magnet here. You'll find that this part here is positive, this part is negative, this part is positive, this part is negative. So on this side that you were calling negative, you found that there's something positive inside. Or I cut it right here. In this side that I was calling positive, now I found that there was a negative right here. You understand? So again, these things aren't seen as diametric opposites, they're seen as complementary opposites. This side that we're calling positive is meaningless unless there's a negative. This side that we're calling negative is meaningless unless there's a positive, but both are necessary to complete the whole, as opposed to European thought where one thing has to be good, the other thing has to be bad. And everyone knows those things in European thought. If I say white and black, which one is good, which one is bad in European thought? No one had to teach you in primary school which is which, but you know. If I say blonde hair and black hair, which is good, which is bad? You all know.
Black hair is good.
Yes, wonderful. I'm glad to hear you say that. Now, if we're talking about in European thought, that's not the thought.
But now we know better.
Now we know better, right? So again, we're able to see very quick. So we're able to see the difference of, as we see things as African, one of the core aspects is this idea of complementary. One of the main aspects of the European thought is opposites, diametric opposites. Man has to be against woman. If I say in European thought, man and woman, which is good and which is bad?
Man is good.
That's correct. Which is why woman is responsible for original sin, for the fall, for whatever. That's very consistent with European thought. Because they're always trying to find which is good and which is bad. Now, if you're in a cave in an ice glacier, might makes right, only strong survive. If the man is physically stronger, he must be good. The woman is physically weaker, she must be bad. You understand? Because they don't have the world view to see it that we need both parts in order to make a complete whole.
What you were describing about the where you're held, like you're held down. It happened in a boarding house to someone, and a prophet or whatever said she was married to a marine spirit. And needed, which is an evil spirit, and she needs to divorce it in the spirit, and keeps coming to her.
Yeah.
That's how he explained it.
Yeah.
I asked you
Yeah.
that question.
So this is very good. If you have people will only speak based on what they know and what they don't know. So here imagine someone who only knows the Bible. He is impoverished.
I don't think he even really knows the Bible.
He doesn't even know that, right? So he doesn't know any of these things we're talking about. What will he say other than that? You understand? A person who has more to draw from will be able to say, this reminds me of something that the people in Somaliland say, or this reminds me of something that we have encountered amongst the Sangoma in South Africa. Most people don't have a breadth of knowledge to draw from except from Europe. We know about ancient French history, Magna Carta, you know, Franco-Prussian War, whatever, we know about it. That's all we can draw from. That and whatever happened in our little village, period. As opposed to being able to look laterally and see, okay, let's look at Senegal. Let's look at the Poro and Sande. What do they have to say about it? Because again, we looked at Africa as a puzzle. If you only have this single fragment, how will you get a clear picture? Not only do you only have a single fragment, but the fragment has been turned upside down by your enemies, your Eurasian enemies. So how are you ever going to get to a place, even if you want to put it in the puzzle, it's upside down at the end of the day, right? So we continue. But what I would say to that particular thing is that everything is internal, right? So whatever we're talking about, bosom, whatever we're talking about, motia, the point of everything is for you to achieve your inkrabya, right? So things are either assisting you in doing that or they're taking you away from that. And that's how an African would view whatever the experience is. How is this assisting you or how is it holding you back? If it's holding you back, we need to do something to allow you to fulfill your destiny. As opposed to, again, like a European worldview where the whole point of being here is just to praise this imaginary white man. Every single day, overnight service, we're only here to pray. Apparently this white man is so insecure it needs to be praised every single second of every single day. As opposed to an African creator that we are all aspects of that creator. We're here to fulfill our destiny. And there are certain things that have been placed here in order to assist us in doing that. All right? So we continue.
The color thing you talk about,
Yeah.
in historiography, we came across the African conception of colors and its association with good or bad. And in C.C. Randolph, when a chief saw a white man for the first time, he was so scared, and he asked for he's a chief. He asked for a white man to be brought before him. When the white man came, the chief, apparently scared, fell down when the wife had to come and sit beside him. And his expression was that, you are a human being, but you look quite like a devil. And that is how they understand a devil, what it is with regards to color in the ancient time. But today,
Did he use was he speaking English?
no, it was translated something that C.C. Randolph did.
So this is the thing. So even to use the term devil, it brings all this conceptual baggage, and the root of the conceptual baggage is diametric opposites. God is all good, devil is all evil. If you go to various African peoples, they see living human beings as being black, and they see those in the spirit realm as being white, because again, these are complementary opposites. You understand? Just again, coming back to this point of the equal sign, that translation can be such a dangerous thing, because translation can take you right into the European worldview, where it assumes that so many things about the world are like that. It's a good point, because it brings up this idea of this is how this world is. We're all standing upright. I think we mentioned before, the coffin text was this idea where not only the ruler can go to the imperishable stars, but now everyone, this is now the ancestral realm underneath. Everyone has access to it. So now that must be the complement of everything that we know here. So if here everyone is black and standing upright, there everyone must be white and must be upside down. So if you look at different stories of when Europeans first came to the Congo, the Portuguese, that oftentimes people would think that these are dead spirits that have come from Kalunga, the all in all. They must be dead, and they're here. So again, devil has a lot of concept, as does God. Like for me, usually I would just say Onyame. I will never translate Onyame as God, because even etymologically, God coming from Goth, when you talk about Visigoth, Gothic architecture, all of these have a root in an understanding of God as a mound of dirt that Europeans used to worship. So now they've taken a mound of dirt and they told you this mound of dirt is the equivalent of Onyame, or Auradin Yonkopon, that has feminine aspects and masculine aspects. We're putting an equal sign and telling you this Germanic mound of dirt that we used to pray to is the equivalent of your African understanding of male and female being necessary to be a creator. And now we've completely wiped that out too. If you go outside and speak to anyone who's supposed to be ethnically Akan, very few, let me not say none, very few will have any concept of this feminine aspect or masculine aspect. For them now, it's only a man. Not only is it a man, it's a white man. A white man sitting in the sky, right? So the equal sign will kill our conception of reality. Yeah?
So when Richard do attack as in belief systems, yes, when they attack the crowd or they attack the Susu, which part do they attack? Which part do they consume?
Usually it would be the Sun Sun. But again, when we are talking about the Beye, if you look at some of the literature on it, I think Jeche has some, Ridu has some. But when they talk about Beye, they ask elders, what is Beye? and they say you have Baipa and Baibone, that neither one is necessarily attacking anything. You have this thing, and whereas now if someone is pointed out to be a witch, they will, lynch the person. At that point in time, oftentimes they would be associated with specific shrines, and they would help to infuse that shrine with power so it can help the rest of the community. So again, Beye is seen like a knife, to give an analogy. Is a knife good or is a knife bad? Right? If you're a European, you have to elevate this thing to either good or bad. It can't be dependent on context, like ma'at, propriety, doing the correct thing at the correct time. So if I'm looking at this knife, knives are bad. But I know I use the same knife in order to cut my fruit, in order to sustain my family. But when I'm angry, I can take that same knife and strike at someone. So, so they can use their power to attack any part. They can actually attack your physical body, right? But you have all these different cells, and if they choose to use it in that way, they can say, I want to attack your sunsum. I want to force your kra to leave you. I want to, force your body to have these hives on you, to have epileptic shapes. Now they're actually going at your physical body, and it can cause ailments and sickness. But there's an understanding that you have all these different cells, and if someone wants to attack any of those cells, they could. Your home, you may have breathing problems. That's your breath of life, and now you're not able to breathe correctly, right? But it's not necessarily that someone who has the ability to do that will choose to use that in that way. They may choose to use it so that it benefits the entire community. Right? Yeah?
There is a documentary called Demons of Hell.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I don't know how to put it. Basically, the Christian world had difficulties casting out the spiritual demons. Throughout the documentary, no one was able to cast them. And whether those spiritual manifestations were demons or not, nobody knows. And maybe you would do a lot of results to see it. It's about 30 minutes.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Very, very, not you, but
Oh, yeah.
very, very well made documentary by outsiders. So there's no bias about anything.
I would say it's very biased.
Pardon?
I would say it's extremely biased.
The reason why I'm saying there's no bias is perhaps because I felt that they didn't have a need. I saw it and I deciphered what I wanted to see out of it. And perhaps what pissed me off was that the people who were casting out the demons were wearing shirts and tie. So they were doing someone else's business, which you might say is the bias. But of course, most of them wear shirts and ties. So, but I saw it from a different perspective that they were not able to. But invariably, Christians are very concerned about demons and witches and all these spiritual attacks. That's the new language of Christianity in the last few years.
It's actually very old. You can look at the Salem witch hunts. You can go to Inquisition.
Then, but I think here now, or maybe it's
because you're just getting the European worldview, right? So your African worldview is being expelled. So this is the logical conclusion of what happens when you imbibe the European worldview. One thing has to be good, the other thing has to be evil. That's one of the core pillars of European thought, right? This thing has, even the idea of God versus devil, even to use the terminology of demons, all of that has all this conceptual baggage that comes from a European worldview, right? As opposed to a more African understanding of it. So again, like for me, I found it to be very biased. Again, I can pull different things from it that I could say, oh, I think this is useful. It used to be on Google Video before YouTube, they even got YouTube. And I haven't seen it on YouTube again. But if you have it available and you want to make it available, you can put it in the draft.
I have it somewhere. I'll look for it.
No problem. So let's do these last two slides. We have to move. Yeah. So separation as temporary or permanent, normal or fatal. So we say the sunsum or whatever the dream aspect is can go and come back. But there are certain aspects that when they go, it's seen that that's fatal. This part should not go. There are other parts that can just go as normal. They can come back and there's no problem. And it's related to whether that particular aspect is seen as the essential part that causes life inside of a person, or it's just one of the various aspects. So Sun Sum, shadow, dream, sleep at night, and the shadow merges with other shadows. And then collection of selves. So in the text we mentioned soul, quote unquote, name, heart, spiritual double, shadow, ancestral guardian. And you can find that in the Akan context there are even more than these, because beyond those parts you can find idioms that have to do with other parts. So the yem is also one amongst the others. And again, there's no split between what is sacred and secular in this context, right? So why would I say that the yem is completely secular and it's not? It doesn't have anything to do with spiritual. So you have okra, sun sun, re, hon hon, tibwa, which is like your conscience. When you do something incorrect, that's the part that is unsettled. Moja, honam, akuma, itri, adrine, sun suma, yem, din. So even your name is a part of you, right? In terms of looking at what the part came from and where it ends up, so intro, that's where you have in the Akan context, bosom pra, bosom tre, bosom afram, bosom inketia. You have all these 12 patrilineages, right? And then you have these 7 or 8, depending on which group you're talking about, musiabang. So this is whatever abusia you come from. So Ekwana, Yoko, and so forth and so on. So that's where your moja comes from. Once it comes from moja, it ends up being your physical body. And because it's your physical body, that's when it's time to bury you. That's why the abusia is over that particular thing, because it's dealing with the corpse, the efuno, right? So that's what is left after. So of course, that part which comes from your moja, from your body, that deals with physical things, is the one that deals with that. And what you find again in terms of complements, right? So in this case, your antro, your sunsum, your samai, all that has to do with the intangible, the spiritual, right? Whereas on the mother side, all that has to do with the physical, the tangible. But when you look at the traditional spiritual ceremonies, when you look at Akomfo, predominantly the Akomfo are women. So in that realm, they are the ones who are over that which is spiritual. Even in this realm, it's the men who are over that. And then, you look at the male side, you look at the Abosomfo and the Osofo, they primarily are dealing with the physical herbs, the physical maladies, doing the sacrifices, cutting up the ram and splitting up the parts to the different Asofo. And each one who has his position is supposed to get the right leg. This one is supposed to get the left leg. And if you look in iconography of ancient Kemet, they will call it the Kapesh, this particular leg. It's a specific thing that each one is supposed to get their thing. So in this sense, male, spiritual, women, physical. In that sense, female, spiritual, men, physical. So you have a complement on both sides. It's not supposed to be only men do this and women only do that. That it actually has inverted in this sense. And then the okra comes ultimately from Onyame, and it carries with it the Nkrabia, the destiny. And when you die, it goes back to Onyame. So that's the source, and that's the place to which it returns. You have your Shebya, which is your defined place. It has to do with what your living conditions will be, things that are appointed to happen to you and for you. Then your Shebre, which is supposed to be your appointed time of death. And amongst different people, you have different views in terms of whether or not you are the one who selects it or whether it's appointed to you. For some, and different people who are all Lakan have different views of it. Some will say, this is appointed. Onyame said, do this, do this, do this. For others, they see it as a volitional thing. I will do this, I will do that, I will do this. Right? All right, so we'll close with that. And we have to continue from slide 54 next time, because we haven't finished this week's lesson. We had a lot of sidebars, personal stories, questions, and other things. But hopefully all of this is informative to get a greater understanding of the African worldview. Because once you understand the core pillars of it, and then you can see the core pillars of the European worldview, then you can even see whether, as soon as they say devil, what is the foundation of that even concept of that's how the world works. When they say the word God, what is even the concept of that's how the world works? All right, so we'll close that. Yeah.
So as we pack this session, so you have, I didn't get a bit of, my attention must have, gone somewhere, but I think I heard you explaining the basis for why customarily when people die, it's required that they are taken to their family house, preferably for where I come from, the father's house, for them to be laid in the father's, is it bed? The family house, laid in state in the family
for
house.
the father specifically.
Eventually take him to be buried.
Because that's where it came from, right? So you return each thing when you die, all of these selves exist, and each self goes back to where it came from, right? So amongst the Akan as well, traditionally, you would have that exact same thing, where it's even said that the spirit will go to the father's house and wait to be reincarnated. That's why the naming ceremony is from that side that they do the naming ceremony, because those are the ones who will recognize those characteristics, those traits of their own person. It doesn't have something to do with the mother's side, right? So again, it depends on the worldview, but just like this, where here you have in Kemet, this side is male, that side is female. Amongst these people, they may see it, oh, this part, the mother's part is responsible for this, the father's part is responsible for this. That is the same underlying foundation, the same underlying worldview. So whether amongst these people we say mothers will take care of corpses, fathers will take care of, spirit stuff. So we have our family shrine, we have the Nkunya Fie or whatever at the father's side. It may even be the opposite, but as long as you can understand the core worldview of complementary opposites, and there are other things that are mentioned here as well. There's actually a chapter on these commonalities that cut across. Because if you don't understand it in this way, these just look like disconnected rituals that don't make sense. Or they're just pouring something on the ground. What are they doing? Oh, we pour pito and they pour palm wine. It's completely different. But when you understand, and a lot of people who even practice it, I don't think they fully even understand a lot of the foundational ideas. They do the rituals have been passed down, but to understand that this is where the ritual came from, this is why it expresses itself. It's a core African thought, and it just happens to find an expression in this particular way in this location, right? Okay, yeah.
Look at the African world.
Really quickly, the chart that you are doing, that will be an assignment. I want you to bring me the charts of the different aspects that were mentioned for the Benin, for the foam, for so forth and so on. And I want you to diagram them. Where did this particular one come from? If it's Kra, okay, that one comes from the Supreme Being. What does it do? Or what's responsible for destiny? I want you to chart these things out so that you can have organizing principles and then evaluative criteria to evaluate where this one should go, And you should turn that into me next class. On the sheets. Yeah? You can do it as a table in Word, in Excel. I always prefer soft copies to hard copies.
What are we reading for next week?
It's in the syllabus. I've actually put in the page numbers.
It appears what we treated today.
We will finish that
we
up.
read for last week.
Right.
What we treated last week.
Yeah. And this is what I would like to do going forward.
It looks like, yeah.
I would like for us to start off with a review. I don't know what our time is like a brief review of what we've covered up to this point, because I'm lecturing on like a parallel so that we can move forward. But so that we don't run forward before everyone has fully understood, we'll start off, let's say, a 30-minute review. And from there we'll go into the new week. So I introduce it, we explain it, and then you go to read it to get a deeper understanding of it.
So you prefer we treating it and then we go back to read it?
I would actually prefer for everyone to read ahead.
To read ahead.
I would prefer if everyone had already read Person, Divinity, and Nature by now, because it will make our discussions much more insightful and profound. Because, in terms of text, I think this text is extremely accessible and it's written with a very good understanding of Africa and the African world as a whole. Right? And then we have the supplementary text. The supplementary text, usually I just want you to read 20 pages or so. There are a few that I want you to read all. Self-healing, empowerment, therapy, I want you to read all. It will really enhance your understanding. Right?
All right.
Yeah.
This is the first time in this class